So, I mean, I don't know. I think no one really needs an intro on you, to be honest, because I think probably everyone that watches my channel already watches your channel anyway. But for starters, maybe, when did you start playing the game? Like I remember you talked about it in one of your videos, but around which expansion did you start playing, I guess?
Well, pretty long time ago now. I didn't start when the game came out initially. I didn't really have a computer. But initially when I started playing the game, my brother was like, hey, there's this Star Wars game and we can play it together. And I'm like, we've been looking for something to play. I think at the time I played Minecraft and League a little bit at that point.
Yeah.
And I come from RuneScape, but RuneScape had basically imploded at that point. And he's like, okay, let's try out Star Wars. That was I want to say late 2013. And I made my first account, and I remember making a assassin, and I just couldn't stand clicking my abilities. So I was I think I was level 13 or 14. I started dying. I was like, all right, I start key binding, and my brother didn't even make it past I think level 6, and I just all right, I done with this game, whatever.
Okay.
Came back about a year ago, and that was 2014. So I would say that is early 2.0, and that's where I really got into the game after that.
2013. Yeah, I just checked earlier when I checked the expansions when they released. 2013 was, I guess, Rise of the Hutt Cartel at some point. Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah. Okay. So you're basically playing, I mean, almost since launch. For me, it was pretty similar. Actually, my first character was also Assassin. But I played it until level 50 at the time, which was the max. Because my best friend told me he was playing Warcraft before and told me that this game is coming out and let's try it. And we played, I think, for, I don't know how long was actually the 2011 it released, right? I just have to check here the patch notes.
Yeah, 2011. The end of 2011, I think.
Yeah, I think I played Assassin for probably half a year, and I had never played PvP before. So it was my first game. I was also quite a noob, I think I started keybinding luckily right at the beginning, but I had never played PvP before, only PvE games. So I don't know. You said RuneScape. Did RuneScape have PvP or not so much?
Oh. Yeah, for sure it did. That was literally the only thing I did. I just PvP'd. Obviously in League, it's pretty much PvP only. So yeah, PvP was my kind of thing. I was already familiar with PvP as a whole. Just had never really played a traditional MMORPG before. Star Wars is definitely my first one.
Yeah. Yeah, for me too. I played some role-playing games earlier, the Diablo series, for example, right? Starting with Diablo 2 and then Diablo 3. But my best friend, he was coming from WoW. He played that all the time, and I was always too cheap to pay the subscription. When I was a teenager, I never wanted to pay for a subscription, a monthly kind of thing. So I was always over at his place, and playing he was playing, I was watching. But I never got into WoW for some reason. So when that game launched, I guess, I'm not sure, 2011. Yeah, I think I was still in university or something, but I had some money, so I decided, okay, let's try out a subscription-based game for the first couple of years it was, I guess. Yeah, but he stopped playing at some point, and then I kept playing and got into PvP more as well, because in the beginning I was doing the raids, which at the time I think was only Eternity Vault, and then I think Karaga's Palace they introduced with Rise of the Hutt Cartel, maybe? I'm not sure anymore. But I played that first raid, just did the PvE thing. And then at some point got into war zones and then rerolled to Sorcerer, because I think Sorcerer was a bit better back then. But yeah, it's a long time ago. Actually, I wanted to, or one of the things I wanted to ask you, but I didn't really know when you started playing, is, as you might know, right, on my channel, there are a lot of tier lists. So one tier list I wanted to do was ranking all of the expansions, right? From from the release until Legacy of the Sith, I guess. So just from a PvP's perspective, if you had to rank them, I don't know if you maybe like took a longer break in the middle. So for me at least, I did take a break. I think somewhere around 4 point something. So right, the Knights of the Fallen Empire, and I think I briefly came back for 5.0, but then I took a long break until 6.2 or 6.3. So how was it for you? Kind of you started playing, took a break, started again. Did you take any longer breaks, or you tried out all the expansions?
I think my first break was when they introduced the announcement for, I think it was guild ships back in 2.0. And I think they delayed it like 3 or 4 times. At that point, I was just so fed up with the game that I took a break. But I remember thinking about that because I was like, I really enjoyed the game and I didn't want to just like put it down because I was still learning so much. Like there's a lot of classes, a lot of specs, just a lot of stuff to do in the game. And for me, I like to do everything. So there was a lot to do. And I was looking forward to guild ships, and they just kept putting it off, and it gave me a bad taste. And I was like, all right, I'm out of here.
Yeah.
But I had started the game as Assassin, and I moved to Sorcerer. But initially, Vanguard was like the first one I sent all the way up there. Played PT, Tank, and Madness work and raiding, which obviously you did EV and whatnot. I pretty much followed the same kind of like play style to learn the game.
Uh-huh.
And then I started doing progression raiding for I think it was Dread Fortress and Dread Palace when it first came out. That was pretty interesting. I remember playing Annihilation Marauder because I could get the kicks on one of the sides because you had the cooldown and kick, and then you had leap, interrupt, and whatnot.
Yeah, I lost me there.
Yeah, that was a whole different ordeal. I'm sure if anybody that played back then, they know all about that. Annihilation was definitely something else back then. It had the lowest cooldown interrupt, and then it had the leap interrupt. And you could do 0-meter leap, so that was probably the coolest animation in game that is currently gone. Then after that, I transitioned to PvP after I came back after guild ships because I was like, you know what, I kind of know the game enough, and there's nothing really going on. We finally got guild ships, and they weren't all that. Mostly because with the progression group, I eventually just ended up giving up, and I like stopped PvE altogether at that point because guild drama, and I've pretty much not been in a guild ever since then.
Yeah, I noticed on all of your gameplay, you're guildless. I thought it's maybe to keep some kind of anonymity, so you will not get as much focus. But I guess that doesn't really work, at least not for a long time.
Yeah, I do have my own guild. I just have guild tags disabled because at least back in the day there was a lot of questionable guild names, and just in general, just to prevent myself from being tilted. Like when I wasn't very good at the game, at least at that point, just seeing like guild tags, like seeing the same guild tags, seeing the same people in the same guild, it's a 4-man squad, stuff like that. A lot of people will like see that and they'll get discouraged, and I just didn't want to take the chance. Like, sure, I might notice it, but I did my best to make sure that I couldn't notice it, so I wouldn't tilt. Because really, that's the enemy of progress. Like the moment that you feel like you can't do anything, you're just going to give up.
It's interesting. So you originally were played everything, a lot of PvE as well, and then around that time you became a Marauder main. Is that fair to say? Because when I first found your videos, it was I don't know, somewhere I have you saved in my head under the Marauder main.
Yeah. So initially I played Madness Sorcerer in PvP. For anybody that played back then, they probably know who Hoppin is and who Poison is and whatnot. All 3 of us were on the same server on Shadowlands, right? And I kind of like the first few games that I played, I ended up running into Hoppin, which now he's a really good player. Neither of us were very good, and we ended up dueling each other, right? And he had full brutalizer gear. I didn't even know what PvP gear was at that point. And like after the match and whatnot, he started messaging me. I was like, "Yo, how do you hurt so bad?" And I was like, "I'm just doing the PvE rotation, Like I don't know what I'm doing." And then he's like, "Oh my god, your gear is so bad," and I'm just like, "When?" What are you talking about? I have the max PvE gear. And he's like, you need expertise.
Yeah.
And I was just like, what is that?
Oh man.
So it was a whole journey and ordeal. And I remember getting my, was it Ashara, the companion? I
Yeah.
remember getting that companion so geared that I made a Marauder. And I rolled Marauder, and I just ended up liking it so much that I was like, you know what? I'm going to play this in PvP. And as soon as I did that, I never looked back. And I pretty much hard focused on Carnage. I played Annihilation until 3.0, but I hard focused on Carnage for the most part because it was the hardest class, I guess people would say at that point, because you didn't have like the glowy abilities. You had to listen to sound cues. That's why I still play with sound. Game was a lot different back then. And once I eventually got confident in my ability on Marauder, I started branching out to other classes. And a lot of the other classes actually do have a similar playstyle. Obviously, the range are a lot different, but if you learn like Carnage Marauder, which is a hyper-aggressive class, you can transition to Juggernaut really easy. You can transition to PowerTech really easily. It's a good class to like master, I guess.
Mm-hmm. So there was around which time? Was that already in 3.0, like the Shadow of Revan times, or before that?
That was just before 3.0, yeah.
Yeah, okay. Yeah, because I was thinking like when they removed the expertise gear, I was thinking when exactly that happened. Like
5.0.
5.0, that late. Wow, okay.
Yeah.
I thought it was earlier somehow because yeah, I mean
4.0 is forgettable. I think that's the issue.
Yeah, probably why. 4.0 is then probably like a D tier expansion, I guess. But I mean, I actually rate the I guess vanilla version of the game quite highly. I mean, for sure it wasn't perfect, right? There was like the gearing system where you got drops from basically RNG boxes, right? And a lot of the gear was also Valor gated, so you needed to be, I don't know, Valor level 60 for the Battlemaster gear, I think. But the biggest issue, I think, was those RNG boxes, which was really annoying. And I think there was no fixed path back then to farm the gear, so you only needed to get lucky. And that was quite annoying, especially since, I wanted to play multiple classes. I pretty much always like to play, different classes. And back then, obviously, I was still learning, so it was even more interesting, right? And many classes were also quite OP back then. I think actually Annihilation and Watchmen in the vanilla version of the game was probably also one of the strongest specs back then already. But I mean, there were a lot of memes early on, right? With I think that was also in 1 point something with the Arsenal Mercs tracer missile spam, that famous video. And I think Operatives had the knockdown, which now only works against weak mobs in PvE, but it was working in PvP back then. So you'd have this meme of chain stunning operatives in PvP. And many things were quite overpowered back then. But the gearing, I think, was kind of not that great. And then later, I mean, I guess the thing that was fun for me about the first expansion, of course, I mean, it's probably also like a little bit, rose-colored glasses, I guess, but the game was a lot more alive back then for sure. Right, so you had, I don't know what it was at the peak, maybe 1 million subscribers or something like this. I remember at some point I read. So that was fun, right? Because you had just for Germany there were many different servers, and overall you had, I don't know how many servers there were back then, but yeah, definitely a lot more than now, right? There were maybe 30 servers or something.
I wanna say there was like initially 96 or 100 and something servers.
Yeah, it was definitely crazy. Like, felt quite active, and of course, when PvP was new for everyone back then when I started. For sure, the people that had some previous experience, from Warcraft or other PvP games, for sure had a big advantage because, I mean, as most people know, this game is in some ways you could say a clone of WoW, just in the Star Wars universe, with a lot of the similar abilities you have, on the warrior especially.
Yeah.
But I think it still was fun. So like for me, for sure, the vanilla expansion wasn't perfect. There was a lot of bugs happening, and then there was this whole thing with the 8v8 ranked, which kind of took forever, and they kept it in preseason forever, and then eventually the whole thing kind of collapsed. But I think, if they would launch something like SWTOR Classic at some point, I would for sure play that, even though it's had some flaws, just to go back maybe for the nostalgia and try out the old skill trees again, where you could make like some cool hybrids of like a skank tank with half of a pyro tree or something like that. That was super fun back then. There were like some builds.
Yeah, like
the builds you could do. Yeah, exactly. Like on the assassin tank, that was super crazy, or on the Iron Fist build on PowerTech. So there was some very fun builds you could do back then that nowadays you can't really do. Like the stance dancing thing, for example, right? Back then you still had the lightsaber stances, which are now passives. So
spamming Suresu form.
Yeah, exactly. So there were a lot of funny things, and then just changing to the Xian form for the immunity after leap, which was like a vengeance only thing back then. So I think in general, like in the early expansions, and this is, I guess, the next thing I wanted to talk to you about. There were a lot more ways somehow of expressing your skill in PvP. At least it's my opinion, I think, right? Because they, you had, first of all, like more abilities. But then also they I think somehow let you like a bigger degree of freedom somehow, right? Like things like the stance dancing, which you could say, maybe is a bit complicated, but it's not a
skill expression.
It's not a console game, right? Or you could do things on Assassin, since you said you started Assassin, right? At some point someone figured out the low slash and crushing darkness combo, which, in a 1v1, then you do electrocute afterwards, and basically with like one or two hits, the target is basically at 50% or dead. So or even just force lightning with, which Assassin had back then, 30 meters range with recklessness, which is a lot of things that you don't really need all that often, like in your rotation. And I guess that's one of the reasons why they pruned it, right? They wanted to make it easier. Of course, they also added more abilities in over the years, right? Like in 2.0, you had the reflects coming in and the barriers and so on. But I felt like, at least compared to 7.0, jumping ahead, I guess, a bit, where they removed a lot of things, unfortunately. Back then, there was a lot more, little things you could do sometimes that somehow separated maybe like the better players from the beginners, I think.
There was a lot of things actually I can cover on this. I sent you a link, by the way. It's the talent calculator for 2.0 when the McCabe expansion came out.
Yeah, I know this one.
So if you ever want to
look at
that, I know a lot of people are just seeing that, so nostalgic. So in 3.0 they removed a lot of abilities. So for example, I don't know if this happened yet for PT. I think it was like 5.0 that they might have done this, but PT had like unload. It had like an actual selection of abilities that you could do if you're netted. Let's say you're 20 meters away or whatever. You could null shot. You could unload. There were things that you could do besides just stand still and get pelted. There's Deadly Throw, which was a saber throw for Carnage Marauder. It would apply trauma, and I believe at one point it rooted. So that was like a really good like saber throw equivalent, except for it was just better because Marauder definitely needed it back then. And then you also had retaliation on Marauder. That's something I desperately miss, because even on Juggernaut, retaliation is still so incredibly useful. Where I guess was it riposte now? There's just an incredible amount of abilities that have just been pruned and or removed. Like my Marauder's bar in the current state of the game is just miserable. There's so empty, many missing spots. I just don't get it. And when it comes to like Marauder 2, like if you think of like class identity, I usually think of Undying Rage, or Guarded by the Force, or Guarded by the Devs, as most people would say back in the day. now that's not the case. It's unfortunate. And yeah, I think the game was much more difficult when it comes to like skill ceiling. Like there was more skill ceiling room, and you were able to play better. And if you were better than other players, you could express that much easier because there's a lot more answers to the problems that you would basically get into. Nowadays, that's not really the case. We're actually in a meta where Burst is so strong that Burst can basically do more damage or more DPS than HPS can put out. So therefore, you can actually just brute force through a healer.
Mm-hmm.
And the last time we were able to do that I remember, there was one point in 4.0 where gear was really high and we were about to go into 5.0. And then there was also one point in 5.0 when we were about to go to 6.0 with Osa's gear. You were able to do that.
Mm-hmm.
But nowadays, anybody can do it. It doesn't feel good. A lot of new players don't have proper gear. So there's just so many stacking disadvantages that are currently happening that are just making the game that much worse. I can send you a forum post I actually made a while ago, but it kind of covers like the casual game players and just people in general trying to get into Warzones as a whole.
Yeah.
But they immediately turn away because it's just so bad.
Yeah, I think I've seen
things. A lot of these things veteran players don't think about, and these are things that happen. I've made a new account. I've leveled it from virtually nothing to min-max, and like a lot of these issues are just, even as a veteran player, very irritating to deal with, and sometimes you just don't have answers to it.
Yeah. I mean the no bolster for augments for sure. It's quite annoying. I did for the gearing guide that I did a month ago or something. I did a similar thing, a bit different than you, right? I just boosted level 80 on a new account and tried to gear up as fast as possible. But it's quite rough, I would say, at the moment for a new player, right? Even if you have things like the hide and seek, and it's pretty fast with a bit of flashpoint running to at least get 340 gear or something. The augments is I feel, I mean, maybe if you would normally level, you would be able to save a bit more credits, but since everything now costs credits, I think a couple of flashpoints I ran with my boosted fresh level 80, I maybe had 500k credits on that account, and just the repair cost from all of the mobs I was fighting was 400k. So no money left for augments, and then I mothballed that account and haven't touched it since. So that's for sure is a big one, because I mean, it's in your post. You're missing like 2000 endurance, power the same. Yeah. It's quite rough.
Say worst case scenario they could do, even if they don't want to bring Bolster back. The way they currently do it is they have like a set stat for each individual slot. They could just add additional stats for augments, each one individually. So if they're missing X amount of augments, they just automatically get X amount of stat. They could make it like equal to blue augments or something like that. Just something that's better than nothing. And if they don't want to do that, they could totally just make a new, even lower tier augment that's not blue and throw it on, the introduction to PvP quest. Like there are things that they could do. It's just
exactly.
Whether they will.
Just some simple augments. I mean, I guess the quickest fix probably would be to do what they did with crystals and just disable them for PvP, right? Which, I mean, I'm not a big fan, because I mean, I like progression somehow. I like when, patch after patch you do a little bit more damage and not less. But at least for the new players, if you cannot afford augments, it's pretty bad, because already you're at a disadvantage when it comes to knowledge, and then there's the whole pre-made discussion, I guess, that we can get into in a bit. But if you're also at a disadvantage when it comes to to the base stats, to the augments, it's a bit weird. I mean, removing the bolster, I don't really know why they switched that system over. I guess they really never could properly fix the old one. There were so many bugs with it. Like, I remember back in the day, there was, the naked bolster where you would take off all your gear and it would give you better stats in the war zone. and then everyone was running around naked for like a day or two until they fixed it. And then at some point there was a Starship Bolster.
Yeah,
that was
I actually
also
still
good.
have gear.
Me too. Yeah, me
ships
too.
on all my characters.
Exactly, because you never know when it's going to happen again. But yeah, I guess they really just could never work their way through the bugs on that system, so they just decided to write a new one, which makes sense, I guess.
Yeah, like when they initially tried to write the new one, they didn't think about how you can mix match your gear. I did videos on this because this was actually incredibly easy to abuse, and I don't know how they didn't see it coming. So like you could use a matrix cube and then just rock the full 340.
Yeah,
and you would still not be at that item rating, right, to have a negative effect.
Mm-hmm.
So you could just quite literally just get multiple thousands of stats over people, and that's not even including the augments. So there was a massive difference at the beginning when that initially happened. They did eventually fix that, obviously. Pretty much most issues are fixed. If you ever do run into issues, or if anybody else runs into issues, I have posted like many times, but I'm sure like if anybody ever has a question, they can always bring it up to me or anybody else and find out exactly what it is. But if you do think there is an issue, you can do /bug in game and you can bug report it right there. They are pretty quick at actually fixing stuff like that.
Yeah, I mean the one time where there was a Bolster bug in recent times that I remember was the one after which they disabled. I think they also disabled augments, didn't they? It was the crystals and the augments, and it was the one that happened when you removed all of the
1 million health.
Exactly, you remove all the mods and you remove the mod, the enhancement, and the hilt from your weapon, for example, and leave in only the crystal and the augment. And then, depending on what crystal you would have there, it would give you either 1 million health if you had an endurance crystal, or like I don't know, 20,000 bonus damage if you had power in there. So you would do ridiculous bursts. And it was quite fun for an evening if you enjoy bursting people and the other people had it as well. So it was the time to kill was quite fast, let's say, but they fixed it the next morning. That was a bit over the top. It felt more like League of Legends than Star Wars, to be honest. Yeah, that was a fun one.
I stayed away from that one. So I was just kind of nervous about the whole thing. I was like, if they're going to make an example out of anybody, I don't want to be it.
Yeah.
Like, not taking the chance. Because I know, like, people would report me for sure. Yeah. Like, it would take one game and I'd be reported. So I was like, it would have been really fun to play something like Annihilation with 1 million health and just sitting there face tanking everything. Like, you just wouldn't die.
The percentage
heal would just keep you up forever. So you could just be fighting people in acid and have no issue.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Or like on the Juggernaut with the fake health heal of 35%. It's ridiculous. Yeah, it heals more than anyone can damage you. Yeah.
But that back heal for 700k.
Yeah, it's always funny when these things happen because like someone, I remember that still. Like it was yesterday. Some assassin basically one-shot me from stealth, and then again and again. I was like, okay, well, something is not right here. And then after the match, we tracked him down, found him somewhere on the fleet, and checked his gear, and that's when we figured out what the bug was. And then a couple of hours later, I think many people were doing it anyway, so they had to fix it.
Oh,
yeah, but these are always funny. I was thinking, like, what is the funniest Bolster bug out of all of them? Like, I would rank the naked Bolster pretty highly. Because that was just ridiculous. Everyone running around in the underwear in PvP. But I'm not sure which one is the best, actually. There were so many.
I would have to say it was definitely the most recent one, but I didn't get to experience it, unfortunately. I think that one probably changed the game the most out of all of them.
Yeah.
Because the other ones were just kind of like a meta for a while, and then everybody shifted out of it after it got fixed. There
was at one point, I think there was not a Bolster thing, but there was this relic which gave you... I'm not sure if it was some absorb, but it basically made you invulnerable for some seconds. And back then there was still group rank going on in arenas, and everyone kind of knew about that relic. And there was some kind of gentleman's agreement not to use that.
Okay.
And
I ran into that in solo ranked. I'd never really bothered to figure out what that was, but there's a guy who's just literally immortal, and I'm like, dude, your entire team's dead if you literally abuse this to kill me.
yeah.
You're definitely getting banned. Like there's no way that you're not, because you're gonna have to use it twice just to win the match. It's just it's crazy that something like that actually existed, and apparently that existed for a while because PvEers were abusing it for a very long time.
Yeah, I don't know about that. I only remember it from arenas.
Yeah,
and
that's when I first saw it.
and yeah, back then it was funny because I guess the scene back then was already small enough that you kind of knew, all right, maybe there's, I don't know, 5 or 6 teams playing group ranked on our server. These guys are using the relic, these guys are not using the relic. So before every game, everyone would have the relics ready just in case you play against a team that's using that relic. Because I think it didn't make you completely invulnerable or something. So somehow you could kill them. I don't quite remember how exactly it worked.
Probably acid that would kill them.
Maybe it went until acid, yeah, which was quite boring. So, at some point we were just writing to each other and saying, hey, let's not use it anymore because it ruins the fun of the game. So that was, for me, one that was probably one of the worst, but not the most fun. Yeah, the recent one was more fun. It like huge crits.
There's been a lot of bugs in the game, though, like not bolster related. I don't know if you played when low slash had no cooldown, but that was probably the funniest thing I've ever seen in this game.
I don't remember that one. When was that?
I want to say that was like 3.0 somewhere. It lasted for like a day or two.
Okay.
So people could like literally start out from the game. Like I remember going into a Quest Hot Ball, or not Quest Hot Ball, but the pit, the original Hot Ball. As soon as I got to the acid part, as I'm about to get mid, there's like 5 different low slashes flying through the air to hit me. And then another row comes out, and I'm just like, what am I looking at?
Yeah. Yeah, low slash has a lot of interesting things. I mean, still today, the thing you can kind of abuse with the hard stun not breaking the next global cooldown. But I mean, that one, to be honest, I don't mind so much.
Yeah, delayed CC.
No cooldown on low slash sounds a bit unfun. But I mean, I guess even worse was, or maybe not worse than no cooldown low slash. No, I think no cooldown low slash is probably still worse, but wasn't even a bug. It was just a feature back then, right? When the bubble stun for sorcerer was not unique, was not only working on yourself, but to everyone that you put the bubble on. Like that was a thing back then.
Oh yeah, 2.0.
Yeah. That was,
or maybe 3.0. That was not a fun time.
It was a long time ago. Yeah.
Being a Marauder was not fun.
I think it was maybe still in the Smash area where everyone was playing like Smash Marauder. I'm not sure. Yeah, my memory, it's a bit shaky right now, but that was really crazy. Yeah, because I mean, basically everyone had these bubbles, but it was enough if you just had one sorcerer with that skill, which back then you still had to choose, right? I mean,
yeah.
So it was still kind of an option. You needed to go. Back then it was a lightning thing, I think, right? So you couldn't have that on Madness, I think, but
it had to have been 3.0 because I think that's when they gained the ability to spec it, like all of them, especially healers. I think that's when that happened.
Yeah. Anyway, it was incredibly funny because, or maybe not funny because, yeah, playing a melee, you would just stand there. Sometimes you couldn't even move until the next bubble exploded, then you would just. But there was, I think, a general theme of like the early expansions. Something that I was not a big fan of is, the meme of the stun wars. So many CCs in the game. It felt like every class had even much more CC than they have nowadays. Actually, I wanted to ask you what you think about that, because I feel like it's a kind of a double-edged sword, right? They removed a lot of CC from the game. The Marauder doesn't have the fear anymore, and so on. It doesn't have the CC, and many other classes lost it as well. So it makes it a lot harder to play around tanks, for example, when in arena. Back then, you could do some kind of hard swap where you see the tank, and then maybe try to kill the healer or an unguarded DPS with a hard stun. And nowadays you can't really do that anymore. But at the same time, I kind of like that there's not so much random CC in the game, because most people were just spamming it randomly, into 5 people for no reason, which was really annoying. Really pissed me off. So I'm not sure if I like it or I hate it.
So just pick off of what you just said. I already know that everybody knows this feeling, but let's just say you just killed a juggernaut and he popped fear as he died. Enjoy your 8 seconds of standing there where there's nobody to hit.
Yeah.
But just the fact that functions that way, the amount of people that would just fear as they died would just drive me crazy. I'm glad that's gone.
Yeah.
There's still some crazy people that will run fear still. And please stop. Just I don't know how to describe it, but one of the features in the game, so for example, diversion. When you're playing sniper versus sniper, it's pretty toxic, right? But when a sniper dies and they have diversion out, that diversion immediately disappears. Its effects go away. That's like one of the only abilities that kind of like happens like that. So if they also made CC work the same way, let's say the person died, all their CC that could be out, like whirlwind, flashbang, stuff like that, and even slows. I feel like all that stuff should immediately go away on death. That would make 8v8s feel a lot better. And then going into like CC as a whole, so when CC really got out of control is when we could afford high alacrity back in 5.0, when alacrity was 4.0, alacrity kind of got fixed to work, and then 5.0 alacrity went crazy. You could go high alacrity. We found out the thresholds. They were pretty much common knowledge at that point. You could get all the way down to 39 seconds, and I think even on Carnage you could get down to 30 seconds for your fear. So imagine being force bounded every 39 seconds, or if you're playing against Carnage Marauder, that's 30 seconds. Not a fun time. Alacrity scaling with CC probably should have never happened in the first place. That was definitely a very bad meta. As for a lot of the CC, I think some of the CC definitely should have gone. I don't think Marauder should have lost their choke. I do think they should keep their choke. I don't miss fear. I like having the ability to take fear, but I don't miss it. I do think that should be like one of those abilities that like, oh, you're only taking like group ranked or something like that. But even then, it's a weird situation. So there was a meta in last expansion where I played a lot of group ranked and whatnot. You can't see the leaderboards anymore, but I played a lot of ranked. I pretty much played every single team that was still around, and I think I was like 90 wins and like 5 to 10 losses or something in total. So basically I was number 1 across the board for PD, which was pretty cool. But by the way, I didn't even get silver. I did not get gold. I didn't get top 3. I didn't get any of that because the win requirements existed, which is totally fine for me because, at that point, group ranked is kind of dead. Sure, there's like 5 to 10 teams, but at the end of the day, it's whatever. And the meta for that, a lot of people really didn't enjoy it because it was mostly a melee meta. You couldn't really play range. EU thought that they could play range. And what happens if you bring range into a force-bound meta / burst meta? You kind of just get CC'd and trained the entire match. And there's nothing you can do. You become a liability. You can't cast. The game had progressed at the point that there's just so much CC and there's so many stops for range, or to stop range, I guess you could say, that range became unplayable and it was unenjoyable. And you could do something called fear double carb. And what I mean by that is if somebody fears, right, and then you follow it with carb, or you do it vice versa, you're basically breaking the fear. So that means if they break it, they would normally get force bounded immediately if they broke it. But if you're breaking it with carb, that means they're breaking carb, and the force bound does not go in effect because they didn't break the force bound. So you could get a white bar on players without making the force bound go into effect until they are white barred.
Wait a second. So the force bound, maybe for the ones that don't know what that is, was the kind of set bonus, right? That reduces accuracy for, was it an AoE effect even, or how exactly did it work?
So it was tied to your fear. So let's say you get a 4-man stack and you've got your jug, your tank or whatever jumped in. You got a 4-man all in there, and you don't want any of them to break it. You're playing AP, and you got another AP player. Let's say you're playing double AP. That's really annoying, especially at that point. It's very hard for you to do anything. If any of them break, their taunts will miss. Pretty much everything they have will miss. Nothing will work except for guard. So taunts won't work, damage won't work, CC won't work. Pretty much anything you could possibly think of won't work unless you're breaking to use like diversion on the floor. That would work, or like the sniper bubble, that would work too. But for the most part, it was unpeelable, right? And it made you completely useless for the duration. So if you're getting carved instead, preventing Forcebound from going into effect, because it would be a delayed effect, so it would only go after the fear would have fallen off. But if somebody breaks it on you, it'll still do the timer until when fear would have fallen off. So you could double carb, basically global somebody, and if they did break, they couldn't stop you anyway. And
sounds fun.
When they were on white bar, they would be unable to do anything for at least 6 seconds of that white bar, which was majority of the white bar at that time.
Yeah. Yeah, that sounds like a fun experience.
Yeah.
So I mean, I guess it's good that they removed that.
Yeah, I'm so happy that Forcebound is gone and it should never come back, which gives me worries about PT. Like, all 3 tanks right now have a way to mitigate damage pretty well. So Aegis, Aegis Slash or whatever on Juggernaut. I don't know if you know this, but the AoE variant where it absorbs damage, it's pretty much equivalent to a static barrier. It gives it to you and everybody around you. So that's very good on its own. And then Assassin has the AoE deflection, right? That will lower damage. And then they also have the damage reduction that they can give to allies. So that's really good. So they both have something. Assassin has a little bit more, but it is a little bit more squishy. So the trade-off, I think, is okay. And then PT's got the stealth scan, which I don't like the stealth scan. I really wish it would change to something else, but it's like a mini diversion. It's not a fun time. Again, if a sniper dies and they have diversion out, it immediately gets removed. There's nothing redeeming about stealth scan. It's up all the time. And if you kill them, you're still affected by it.
It's quite ridiculous. I mean, even if you leave, I mean, it's a slow as well for no reason. It's an AoE slow, ground targeted. But even if you leave it, the effect still lingers for like a second or a little bit longer, right? So it's
for a whole GCD.
Incredibly annoying. And if you have multiple PTs, I mean, you can just forget.
Cover the whole area.
The funny thing is that it basically makes any melee that is not a PT useless, which is ironic, right? Because it's like sniper kind of counters sniper because of the diversion, and PT counters PT because you can play 50 meters range and then you can just outrange it. But still, it's a terrible idea. I don't know why. Like after, I mean, they clearly must have seen that. I guess Forceborn was an issue, and they removed that in 7.0, I guess. And then at some point they introduced the stealth scan thingy. I don't know. I'm not a big fan, and I say this as a PT main for many years now. But I think it's not good for the game and not good for the class either.
I've not even used it once.
Yeah,
that's just how I feel about it. I don't think that I need it. Is one, honestly, outranging your opponent and using line of sight is way more valuable than it is to just stand there. I know that there are some games where they'll be locked down so hard that you won't be able to.
Yeah. And
having stealth scan will be really valuable, but honestly, if you're not tank PT, you have no business having the ability to even take that. It makes no sense at all.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, it's one of those things. I think if everyone could just agree that we're not using that ability anymore, I would be very happy. I mostly see it on pyros or on APs that somehow are insecure. I don't know, but I haven't used it in months now, and it's just for me it's quite unfun because actually one of the things I enjoy most about AP is this kind of like semi-ranged, so you can do funny things. If a sniper knocks you back, you're still in range to attack them. Which is one of the reasons why PT is so good against sniper, and I kind of like it, to have a class that's neither full melee range nor 30 meter classical range, which I think was also I guess, I mean, back in the day PT was probably, you could say, even more of a hybrid, because I think like Unload and Railshot, they had 30 meters, right? Or
yes, they did.
They had a long range.
You had a talent for that. Yeah, you had a talent for it.
Yeah.
It's pretty crazy.
It was pretty crazy, but I think it was cool because, you were, like a mix. And I guess nowadays you have, I mean, maybe lethality, which you could say, can do damage at 30 meters. But if you want to maximize it, then you need to get in there, spread your dots, and do the lethal strike and so on. But PT is the other hybrid class, and I think it's kind of cool because you can kite other melees. I think it's fun to play. So it's another reason not to use stealth scan, I think, to get the 50 meters instead.
I would say just before 6.0. I really like the meta for pretty much all the classes for 5.0. I think that was a fine line between like progression with abilities, utility, and CC. But when we started getting like the high alacrity, I feel like if we could go back to that and then remove the scaling alacrity with CC, I think that would be like a really fun meta to just go back and enjoy. But going into like 6.0, we had the issue of just damage exploding too much. I don't know if you know this, but back in the day when we played in previous expansions, healing is almost always doubled what a DPS could parse.
Mm-hmm.
Now, I believe at the end of 5.0, we were seeing like 11.8 to like 12k or not HPS, but DPS parses, and healing was like 20k, which is still pretty. It's not necessarily double, but it's pretty up there.
Close enough,
especially if you were doing AoE in those situations, chances are the healing is always going to outperform because it's going to be able to do AoE a lot better. And the moment you get into a scenario where you go into 6.0, you see 20k, 30k DPS. You get into AoE, you're going to explode in damage. Like, for example, I did 50,000 DPS on Vengeance, like on release, when we made Cut to Pieces. And I'm just like, okay, this is illegal. Yeah. Why does this exist? Yeah. And that was in an arena, and I was just like, okay, this is not good. And I see healers, obviously peak operative with the revitalizers and everything. They were relatively tanky at that point. They were pretty playable without a guard, I would say, at that point. Nowadays, that's complete opposite statement. Yeah. They're just not. They're not it. And even then, like, you would see like 30k HPS to like maximum. That would be like where you're peaking. Sometimes you could maybe get more, but that's really in a fluff game. That's probably not something that's ever going to really like actually happen. So you would see like 25 to like, in a good game, and then you'll see like 30 in like a really, really good game, or just a really, really good player. And then moving on to 7.0, healing is
the same pretty much, yeah.
Not only is it kind of the same, it's kind of worse. Because you lost a lot of utility, you lost a lot of defensive power, and for the most part, most players nowadays don't even get Bolster, so you're wasting your heals on somebody that's getting hit for like 80k every single GCD. There's no heal in the game that can match that kind of pace. And when somebody is playing with bad gear or almost no gear, there's like no advantage for you like to heal them. You're just wasting your resources basically, which really, really does suck.
Yeah, like on the healing side, I remember there was one point in I think it was at the end of Rise of the Hutt Cartel where they overbuffed Hatred Assassin, and then at that point you could solo a healer maybe in, I don't know, 8 or 10 seconds. Like I remember this vividly because before it was always, I think, like you said, basically one healer could out heal 2 DPS if, let's say, they're on equal skill level, right? There's also, of course, guard in the mix and other people peeling, but roughly it was like that. But then at some point, I think the issue was mostly Hatred back then because they overbuffed it, and must have been in 2.8 or something like this, where was the first time where you could easily solo a healer, but that was kind of a one-off, I think, and then afterwards they nerfed it, and then they introduced the dot spreads in 3.0, which is another thing I guess I want to talk about because that's another big one.
The madness hatred thing.
Yeah, exactly. But on the healing side, I mean, how would you address it? Like, if you were in charge of balance, what would you do about the healers? Would you give them like a strict output buff, like so they can heal more, or is it more like the defensive issue?
I would be completely against an output increase. I think that they need to stray away from that because, so for example, I don't know if you know about Fury and why it got nerfed. It was parsing. It was number one parser. It was above Hatred. It was really good. But the only reason it was able to parse so high is because you were clicking off your Berserk buff, so you could build up Fury stacks faster to use your Berserk more often, which Berserk gave you an auto crit. And if I've lost you, I'm sorry, but basically they're playing keybinds plus clicker simulation, so they can't really maneuver their character in any sort of way because they have to constantly click something off, and you have a chance to click off your buffs, your stems, so on and so forth. So you had to be really precise, and it was a very weird setup that you would have to do to actually make this work. And you could do it while you're parsing. Yeah. So when you're parsing, it's something that you can do, but in like reality, like actual gameplay, like PvP or PvE, you're not going to be able to do that. You might be able to click off once, like every like 30 seconds to like a minute at best. It's not a feasible thing. And it inflated parses so high that everybody complained about it. That people were getting up to like 38, 39,000, I think it was at the time. And they're like, okay, let's nerf it. And obviously, Marauder at the time did need a nerf. We got Defel Splice Genes, so people were complaining about that in PvP. And then they're like, oh, its damage is too good. But they didn't really have the foresight to see that, hey, defensively, this class is horrible. Let's not over nerf them, but they did anyway. So they got rid of the auto crit because it was parsing too high. So I think any like output related things I think they should just steer away from. I think they should probably, for healing, tackle at a ease of play. What I mean by that is most healers that play this game, they don't really get a chance to learn. So obviously there's like skill tiers. Like as soon as you start, you're going to be probably god awful. And you're probably never going to get better because you're never going to get anything done when you're god awful, and you get better and better and better. Obviously, when you start playing against players that are on your skill level, it's going to be a little bit different. But when the worst DPS can double to triple your HPS output, it doesn't feel good. So if they added like a new ability or a new tactical or a new implant or whatever to kind of match the DPS burst windows. So like HPS burst windows is probably what I would tackle. So let's say like Meteor Brawler Explosion, but for Mercenary with Energy Shield. Something like that could be really cool. Or the old Kolto Missile tactical that allowed you to basically play the class a lot easier, and it did more healing. Like Sorcerer, you could definitely do something like having another stack of Roaming Mend as like a tactical, or you could have like AoE Enervate, what's another one, which would obviously give you more incentives to actually kick into or Enervate, which you should be doing in the first place. You've also got back in 5.0, I think there was a set that was coming out for Sorcerer healing from Duxon. So basically what happened if you were affected by Resurgence or Revivification, you could get the healing from the Sorcerer that pops, was it Unnatural Preservation, I believe?
Yeah, I think you talked about it in your videos, yeah.
Yeah, so you could give that heal to other players, but they had to have been affected by Resurgence or Revivification, so it would require people to actually stack. Now, I do think that could probably be a little overpowered, obviously that specific one, but there are definitely ways that you could tackle that, and I don't think just going for output would be a good way to do it. I think they just need to make the class, or as classes in this case, easier to play. So for example, Operative really needs damage reduction. It has none.
Yes. Having
Revitalizers back would help a lot. Just having the ability to match the pace of the burst windows. So for example, a lot of times when people are like, oh, I want a number farm and stuff like that, if you actually play seriously, your DPS window, if you're playing well at least, is going to spike. And when it spikes, you're probably going to wipe the enemy team because healers don't have an answer to that. They can't spike their HPS like that.
Yeah.
So that's definitely something I would say should happen. I know you were talking earlier about augments and removing those. I wouldn't say I'm against it, but I'm also not for it. And the only reason I say that is because our stat pool sucks. I'd be more so interested in like a static stat pool for like PvP as a whole. I think that would be better because I don't feel like we have much build options, and if we remove augments, we don't have any options, right?
Yeah.
So pretty much everybody's running, 1.4, and then they're running whatever crit they can get, and that's it. And if you play an accuracy class, you're kind of fucked, which I said before, honestly, every white damage spec should probably just get 10% accuracy for free, at least in PvP. That would definitely help a lot of things, and defense chance would still be relevant because, tanks have the 5% accuracy debuff, and then you've got other like defense chances like predation. So I think it would balance out.
That's an interesting suggestion, actually. Like the baseline accuracy, I guess, in the same way that tanks have it.
Yeah.
So yeah, for those that don't know, tanks, if you just spec into tank combat style, you get, I think, also is it 10% accuracy by default, just for being a tank, right? So you basically never need to run any accuracy in PvP, which is also one of the reasons why skank tanks, they can just put everything into crit once they have the 2000 something alacrity, and then hit you for 100k crushing blows, for example, which is interesting. But yeah, the white damage thing for sure is, it's a whole nother topic. I know you talked about it in the past also with Arsenal, for example, right? Which they've buffed now a couple of times. So kind of they went the opposite way of Marauders, which, I think, especially Fury was quite overpowered when 7.0 launched, but they probably didn't need to nerf it 3 times. On Arsenal, now they buffed it 3 times, but still kind of sucks, because your auto crit is not your hardest hitting ability, but it's also white damage, and then your priming shot can crit really hard if you have the right tactical, but it feels like it misses in 50% of the cases anyway, because there's some deflection somewhere, or a tank debuffed you, or there's a diversion, or I don't know, it just goes into Narnia. So it feels really bad to play, and I think Marksman is in a similar place. So I guess the only spec is Carnage, because the tactical is just so ridiculous. You basically have 90% critical rating.
Still over 100.
It's quite interesting, that spec. But it kind of gets carried by the tactical, I think, and all the other white damage spec. Maybe with the exception of Deception, sometimes are kind of suffering, I think, at the moment. But yeah, maybe just to stay on the healers for a second, because I know you don't play a lot of healers. I also don't play a lot of healers, but I tried recently, like, because I'm still missing Medicine Operative Guide. So I tried recently to play Medicine, and it's just terrible, man. This is horrible. It's you get absolutely one shot if you ever get hard stunned, and the PT looks at you, maybe with one other friend. You can break vanish, or you're pretty much toast. So it's and
then if you reveal afterwards, you're definitely dead. Yeah,
you're definitely dead. Exactly. You have like 1 minute 30 if you spec into it, and then if you don't have your vanish out, then you're pretty much toast. And the HPS is nice. If you can keep up your probes on people, you can definitely heal a lot. Like, the output is not bad.
Yeah.
You just never get the chance, because, as you said, the burst is so crazy, the burst DPS that you're getting. And, what do you really have? You have Stim Boost, which is like you spec into it, 15% more healing for, how long does it last? I don't know, 20 seconds, maybe. Maybe not even that, right? But it's
15,
it's just the burst DPS that you can do, so much higher than the burst HPS, which healers can do. Even a sorcerer, if you have, polarity shift, even then, you cannot heal through PT and then NG sniper bursting or something like that. So unless you can somehow run away, or you're getting a guard, then it's good night, which I think it's a shame, because I think it didn't used to be that way. It used to be the way that, like I said, before maybe 2.8, when they overbuffed hatred, you could never really only want a good healer. That just wasn't a thing, right? You always needed to somehow coordinate with someone else to maybe get a hard stun on the healer and then burst them. And burst for sure back then, which I guess is another thing that people forget if they didn't play back then. The time to kill and the burst, like how hard you were hitting, how fast you were killing people, was probably higher than it is now, even nowadays, even, right? Because like for Marauder, when you played Carnage, you would do a Gore Ravage, and if you had 2 Marauders, you could one-shot the tank back then. So it was absolutely crazy. Like, you could hardstun the tank. I'm not saying that happened to me back then, but it might have. And you get absolutely shredded by 2 Carnage Marauders or something, right? So So the time to kill for sure was crazy, but still, I think as a healer, 1v1ing them was not really possible. So I actually like the idea of buffing the burst heal. I think that would fix a lot of things.
So even in 4.0, Carnage could do its rotation, like, through the choke into Gore, Ravage, Devastating Blast, Vicious Throw. Like, that would 100% kill somebody if they didn't react to it. I still have a clip of actually doing that from ages ago. I don't really feel like looking for it, but it's pretty funny that even in 4.0 that was a thing. There was another thing too, like if a marksman sniper, for example, if you got 2 marksman snipers on you, you have double vital shot on you. If they decide to use their auto crit ambush into 10 rounds, chances are you're 100% dying from 100 to 0. Doesn't matter what you pop. Like, the burst used to be pretty crazy, and in 2.0 I remember hitting a 30,000 Force Scream. That was with the Adrenal, because you could use Adrenals back then, and you could also use Bloodthirst in the arena back then. So you could hit really hard, and then there was obviously expertise that played a factor in that. In 3.0, you were not hitting 30k with Devastating Blast. So, yeah, Burst was nasty in 2.0.
Yeah,
for sure.
But you need to put in perspective how much HP people had back then, right? So when people are saying nowadays, for example, oh, Deception has so much burst, it one-shots me in Shadowcraft window. I mean, back then you had Maul sometimes critting for 30% of your HP, which
to
was
put in perspective. 30,000 Force Scream is 30,000 of 32,000 was your HP pool.
So that basically
was your whole health bar.
Yeah, exactly. So I mean, that's fucking crazy, right? It's like Bolster exploit levels of burst damage. So, and then comes 7.0 where we're now. I feel like I mean, again, I took a longer break before maybe 6.2 or something. But always when I came back, like I checked, okay, what did they do to kind of the HP to damage ratio, and felt like it has constantly somehow gone up over the years. So, back in the day, you could maybe crit for 30% of someone's HP. Now it's maybe, I don't know, 20%, right? If you get a 100k hit, someone has a bit over 400k HP. Obviously, there are exceptions, right? You have some classes can hit much harder, but I think in general, the kind of how much you can take out of someone's health bar is a bit less nowadays, which is weird because overall it still feels like there's more burst damage. Just maybe, I don't know why.
Well, if you put it into a different perspective, I know a lot of people might be completely lost with this, but if anybody pays attention to the damage taken per second metric, it's very important when it comes, like, when you compare games, like, hey, I feel like I took a lot of damage here. And you go and you look, you only see you took about 12k damage per second. That's really not a lot. And when you look at some of my videos, there's games where I've taken 18 to 36,000 damage per second. I'm talking about like 8-man stack just tunneling one person the entire freaking game.
Yeah.
Like, the damage taken to be lethal, by the way, let's say if you're not really getting healed too much, or if you are getting healed, chances are you're not really seeing more than 4 to 6k HPS being directly input into you unless you have a pocket healer that's dedicated to just keeping you up. Then you'll start seeing way above like 8k HPS and more. But for the most part, you're only going to receive about 4 to 6k. That's usually the average, and sometimes you'll just get caught. It's just the way it goes. Dying in aviates is kind of intended. So the damage taken to be lethal in a relatively quick time is only around 12,000 to 15,000. That's not a lot. So if you think about even the worst DPS players possible in the game, let's say Mufi, if you played NA at all, you probably know who Mufi is, or Phobos, or Dancing Twi'lek. That's another person. If you run into these players and they all hit you at the same time, and if they do it at the bare minimum 5k DPS, they will kill you in a relatively quick amount of time.
Yeah.
Because we can't actually mitigate that damage anymore. We don't have the defensive power left. And the classes that do are obviously so much better.
Yeah, I mean, on the class balance topic, I mean, I know you made also a couple of videos on that one. I don't want to repeat everything that you've already discussed there, but I don't know. I mean, if I think about PowerTech, for example, right? I think in 7.0, PowerTech actually got one of the best indirect buffs out of all the other classes, simply because they didn't
Power
remove
load.
power load, exactly, the tactical which is now a passive. But also because they didn't remove anything that's, I mean, maybe except the hard stun, sure, like the electro dart, which I kind of miss. But other than that, you really didn't lose too many of your abilities on PT, right? And you gained some pretty cool things. Like you said, always have the energy burst auto crit without a tactical. And you have the 15 meters range, which, also, I guess, wasn't a thing before.
Their talent loadout makes the most sense. Like, when it comes to well thought out, their talent layout is just amazing. Like, they did an excellent job on it. Whoever did it understood balance a little bit more than the other people that did the other classes, but also at the same time, he seemed to actually understand the class as a whole. I do think that's one issue. Like, I don't feel like they understand Marauder at all. The fact that you have to take predation, that's like the other classic iconic ability for Marauder. Like, it's definitely just one of those issues.
Yeah, I mean, predation and then also undying, right? Because you said earlier, when I think about a Marauder, I think about undying rage, which back then used to be, quite punishing, and actually used to be a skilled ability, because if you would use it too early, you would have to, and many newer players maybe don't know that, but back then I think you would spend 50% of your current HP, right, to get the damage reduction. Yep. So you would lose that HP, get the 99% damage reduction, and so that made it somehow, skilled ability that you needed to use at the right time, because use it too early, you lose half your life, and use it too late because you're greedy, and then you die without using it, right? So that there was some kind of cost to it, and nowadays it's not really a thing anymore. I mean, you have to take it on Marauder, but
there was 3 things that were actually like that back then. There's only one currently now, and that's a Durpain. But back in the day, if you used Consuming Darkness on Sorcerer, that would take health from you.
Mm-hmm.
So if you had that, and then you had Undying Rage, and then you have Durpain. All 3 of these were like double-edged swords, kind of like defensives, and the whole idea of at least Undying Rage is that you would use it when you were low. It'd give you 99% damage reduction, and then like you would pop med pack afterwards, because you'd be able to keep that health. So even if you did pop it when you were low, you could just go ahead and hit med pack. And, you get that health back, and then the healers can heal you. If you don't need to use med pack, just get the healers to heal you. That's a lot better. But it was a completely different meta back then too. Like something I wanted to say earlier that I completely forgot is that when we were playing the older expansions and whatnot, we had a lot more diverse like options. So for example, you could run a double set bonus. So what I mean by then is that you could run a different class's set bonus if you had similar ability. So let's say Juggernaut and Marauder. You could combine those together. So you could have a 2 set piece, and then you could have a 4 set piece, making a 6 set piece. But it would just be 2 different things. And then when you went into expansions where they changed the PvP set bonus, you could then rock the previous expansions plus the new expansions set bonus. So you could have a 6 set bonus, but in theory it would actually only be a 2 and a 4. Which was really weird. So you would have the original 2 set piece, and then you would have the 2 set piece from the other set, and then you also have 4 set from that.
I completely forgot about that.
So there was a cheese with Marauder in 3.0, which made it arguably really good, which didn't last for that long because in 4.0 kind of went away. You were able to stack the Undying Rage cooldown reduction, so you could get it down to like a minute 30, I think, and it actually just made Undying Rage like really good. And Marauder felt really good. And I think Undying Rage, with the talents in the set bonus, you could have like 7 seconds of Undying Rage. It was incredibly good.
Yeah, that's crazy. What is it now? Is it 6 or 5 seconds?
I actually don't remember. I want to say
it's one of the 2 anyway.
Somewhere around there.
7 seconds and 1 minute 30 cooldown is pretty good, yeah. But you still needed to spend the HP back then.
Yep.
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, I kind of like that, how it was back then. I think they should have like more abilities like that, that somehow have a cost, right? Or you need to use them at the right time, right? So you, like you said, you don't want to use Undying Rage the other way around. You don't want to use Med Pack before Undying Rage, Because then you basically just waste the heal, right? Because you're going to lose 50% of that HP that the medpack heals as well. So you want to use it afterwards. And I think, these are small things. But by kind of removing that, I think they just made the game easier. And then in the same way, when they obviously took out abilities, that also gives you less degrees of freedom of things you can do. Just in some situations, maybe back then, if you're playing assassin and someone barely got away from you, you don't have low slash ready, you could still, use recklessness and force lightning to kind of finish them off. And nowadays, obviously, you can't do that anymore.
Or slow.
Force slow, yeah. There was a thing until recently, yeah.
No, we still have it. Unironically, that's like what I have to do in that situation. I'm just like, force slow, I guess.
Wait, force slow is still in the game?
Yeah.
Wait a second. I have not seen that a single time.
I use it all the time on Deception.
What the fuck?
It's my E command.
Force slow. I guess on Deception you can spec into the voltaic /slow, which is that still bugged? It used to be bugged, right? Where it gives you like a 70% slow instead of 30%, it says on the tooltip.
Oh yeah, the volatile. Yeah, so basically what was happening there is because you would hit it once and then it would also hit a second time, it would stack those slows on top of each other. That was not intended.
That was probably like a 60% then.
Yeah, so like think of the dual weapon kind of thing, like with Gunslinger having the double procs and whatnot. Kind of like the similar ideal there.
I guess I should play more Deception. Deception really still has force slow, crazy stuff.
Yeah.
And
not a great ability, but I'll take it.
Yeah. How about Sorcerer? They removed it from Sorcerer now because Sorcerer.
Because you got Overload, I think.
Yeah, but Overload is another thing that annoys me that I could like.
Yeah. 5 seconds of root.
The cooldown is so low. The root is baseline, which back in the day you needed to spec into it. And Overload is sure, it's a range class, so you have a knockback baseline like all the others is fine. But did they really need to make it, an AoE route, and it's the one with the shortest cooldown as well, which is just like quite overpowered.
And for those that are unaware, there's a unique interaction with Overload and snipers. So if you're using your Overload, if you're ever able to protect a sniper or a gunslinger, mind you, this also works with mercenaries and jet out. Anytime they use roll or jet out, you're able to actually catch them in between that, and you can get them stuck. And on top of that, you can do this to operative.
Yeah.
Don't do this to operative, but you can do this to operative and you can get them roll bugged.
Yeah.
But for sniper, what will happen instead is that it'll actually take them out of cover, and they will not get their like entrenched bonus. So if they're playing marksman, they'll actually lose their entrenched bonus because they never technically rolled. So there's definitely some really annoying things about Overload. And I don't think it should be like that. And it's the only reason that can happen, by the way, is not only with desync, but I think there's a damage type mismatch with Overload, or the Republic version of Overload. It's one or the other. There's definitely a damage type mismatch there. Because you're supposed to be immune to that while you're using those abilities.
Mm-hmm.
Except for lethality, obviously.
Interesting. Is that like a similar thing, like what happens with Carbonize going through Shroud?
Yeah, it's a damage type mismatch. So when I brought up the thing to like Snave ages ago, how Commando Net, or I think it was Commando Net that was just going through God roll every single time. I was like, that's got to be a damage type mismatch. Obviously, you have 100% defense chance, but clearly that damage type doesn't follow the accuracy rule, so therefore it's going through every single time. Well, Mercenaries did not. And trying to convey that to the dev team like over the years, I've tried so many times. Like most of these issues are probably not that complicated. It's probably just really hard to find these specific issues and maybe the code or something. But a lot of the issues are definitely a lot more simple than most people think.
I mean, that one seems
probably
like
just
would be
hard to fix.
Yeah. I mean, I'm not sure. I'm not a developer, but it seems like if it's really just the wrong damage type, that sounds like a relatively simple one.
Yeah, it does seem like that, but who knows?
Yeah. Well, so what would you do about, let's say, the pruning thing, right? Like if you would have to I don't know, let's say you could wish for 3 skills that they bring back, right? Obviously, they cannot all be Marauder skills, but how would you reverse the pruning? Because I think it's, like I said earlier, right? I think it's good that they took out some abilities, because I definitely don't miss being chain hard stunned or chain feared.
Yeah.
And I definitely think it's annoying that you have so many rotational slows, especially playing melee. But
that was a big complaint for me in 5.0 and 6.0. I gave a ton of feedback, and I was like, any slow past 50% just shouldn't exist. You shouldn't have rotational slows. You should have a reason to use force slow, which,
yeah, exactly.
They'll use it for damage when people are running away. And they're immune to the slow anyway, so it's like, what's the point? I would say probably not go the route of unpruning, but rather change the philosophy of how they do things as a whole. So, for example, on our trees, we have defensive or utility abilities lined up with damage. So, for example, if you ever played Sniper, there's a critical hit damage for Snipe, which in PvE you usually take. This means you don't really have as good as a defensive kit, because you're not taking dodge anymore, or evasion. You're just taking the surrender. So that is a really good damage buff, but you can't take it because you need the defensive power. Like, I feel in no way, shape, or form for any of the classes at all should ever have to pick their defensive over damage, or vice versa. I don't think that should be a thing. And the same thing for utility. I feel like if you're going to have utility, all of that line needs to be utility. If you're going to take defensive, all that line needs to be either utility or defensive. There should never be a situation where you're picking damage over the other. And I feel like the only reason you should ever have that scenario is when you're looking at like tacticals. I don't think damage tacticals or damage set bonuses, like when they're really generic, like 5% healing or tech damage, for example, I think that's an operative one. A lot of these are just too generic to really feel like to justify existing, right? While I like them, I do think they should definitely focus on things that actually change the way you play and give your class more diversity or different ways to actually play. Because the whole ideal for them when they were bringing this into the game was to change the way how people could play your own way. Instead, there's just a meta, you go the meta, and
Sure.
that's it. So I do think a lot of abilities should come back, but at the same time, if they just change the way they did it as a whole, I feel like we could all have what we wanted, but also at the same time have the ability to change accordingly.
Yeah. I mean, if we're going class by class, you already mentioned AP Tactics. I think is pretty good. Pretty nice skill tree, right?
Yeah.
There's lots of options that make sense. Many people, of course, are saying, and probably rightfully so, the burst is a little bit strong. But then, sustained DPS, you have to think about PvEers as well, right? Which is a whole another topic. Because obviously they're not balancing the game just for PvP. Sometimes they're nerfing classes for PvP. But of course you have to think about both things. So I feel like AP is actually in a pretty decent spot, right? It's not completely flavor of the month because ranged classes are so strong. And AP can still die, especially if you don't have a guard. Because it really doesn't have a way out other than hydraulics. But I think the skill tree at least is quite balanced. There isn't much I would change or remove except for removing the Scalp Scan, the advanced Terminator droid.
Yeah, I would say if you change anything on AP, like power wise, I would probably look at getting the energy burst reset on power yield. Probably get rid of that so the burst windows on the class is not as deadly. And looking at the tactical powered detonator, I think that not only makes it incredibly easy to play the class, but also at the same time, it creates a unique situation. So let's say you pop barrier. Force barrier is not that good in the first place, and you pop barrier with a thermal on you. Well, guess what? That thermal is not going anywhere. And when you get out of that thermal is going to explode.
Yeah.
And if it's timed well enough and you misplayed well or like really bad, guess what? You're getting another thermal on you immediately afterwards. It's not something that feels good. There's also a situation too. I don't know if you know this. If you're running power detonator and you head into, like, let's say Shroud with your energy burst. It'll give you empowered thermal detonator, right? And obviously you didn't pop your thermal detonator yet at that point, right? And then you can turn around and hit the target that has thermal detonator, and you got a free empowerment without actually having to use energy burst.
Ah, okay.
So there's you can do that with diversion. You can do that with the tank relic that has chance to resist.
Yeah.
There's just very specific animation for that, so I wouldn't recommend trying that unless you know. And then Shroud. Any ability that doesn't actually get I guess used up because you miss, you can basically abuse that mechanic.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I never really used that tactical, but until recently, it has a couple of funny uses for sure. I mean, the slow is pretty strong. Again, 50% slow, which otherwise you don't have unless you spec into suppressive tools. But
it used to have 75% slow in Slack Shell.
Oh yeah, that was crazy. That was crazy. Yeah, I was a bit sad when they removed it, but only because I'm APPT main, so it was definitely not bad for the game as a whole, let's say. But yeah, I mean, the slow is pretty good in that tactical, and then what you said, right? And I mean, it also allows you to get more than one thermal detonator in a fuel window, which is nice. So I actually don't hate the tactical as much as I used to when it first came out. But I was a bit sad because initially when they had it on PTS, it would reset the cooldown of thermal detonator itself, right? So there was, I think, the first version where you could thermal detonator, energy burst, thermal detonator, energy burst, which
that would have been ridiculous.
That would have been absolutely ridiculous. And I was sitting here waiting, twiddling my thumbs, waiting for the day when it would be released. And unfortunately, they changed it to the version that it's now.
I think if that came out, they would have just completely gutted the class. Like that, they wouldn't understand what the problem with AP is. They wouldn't realize that was the tactical the whole time.
You think so?
They probably would have completely gutted AP. Yeah, for sure.
I don't know. I mean, they've been trying to make a good tactical for AP for so long, and now they just kind of went back to what we already had last expansion anyway, right? Like buffing the bleed damage is super boring. I don't know. I mean, I guess the idea is not bad. You want to buff the sustain without making the burst super crazy. But
the burst is already super crazy. That's part of the issue. They should have kept it with probably power load. Yeah,
it is. I mean, the getting the power load passive was a bit silly, I think. I mean, they fixed the worst bugs, I think, right? With the thermal detonator, you could have the 4 stacks and the 3 stacks and the 2 stacks on your Empower TD. That was funny, but I mean, after they fixed that, to be honest, the burst is still crazy if you have all your cooldowns up. But once they're down, they're not that. It's not that crazy anymore. I mean, sure, you can one-shot someone from 250,000 HP if you get lucky in a hard stun. But if they took off a little bit of the burst, I'm not sure I agree with the whole power yield resetting energy burst. I think that would feel kind of bad because I'm just so used to it now. But if they nerfed it a little bit, I don't know, make it give 2 stacks or something. I don't know. That would probably be too bad. Although you could do then a combo of saving your rail shot and then you could quickly get to 4 stacks anyway. But I think if they would need to nerf anything, it's probably a little bit the burst, maybe by, I don't know, 10-20%. And then maybe buff the sustain, because I feel like if you have classes on you that actually have good sustain damage, like a Carnage Marauder, you just have to run away, or you get out damaged as AP if you don't have cooldowns up.
Yeah, I feel like AP's sustain is really good already. I think when it comes to sustain, you got Deception, Hatred. Obviously those two. I think their sustain is probably the best in PvP. And then you have AP and Carnage. Carnage is probably the best, hands down, just because of the broken tactical, which allows them to hit well over 100% crit rate.
Yeah,
which is just insane to think about. And that's after nerf. I never played it before it, in its original form. I only played the nerf version of it. And it was absolutely insane. So I can't imagine how terrible it was to deal with that.
Yeah, the one before was twice as strong, right? It was 50%, and now it's 25%.
Yeah, it was insane. So you were hitting really hard with that, and I don't know. I mean, the resetting the energy burst is just as a thought to like, you know, nerf the burst windows, because that's kind of like the main thing is like when it comes to playing AP, how easy is it to throw thermal and then energy burst twice? It's pretty easy. Dump shoulder cannon at the same time.
It's pretty easy. It's not a lot of skill involved, no, for sure.
There's not a lot of thought of it. Obviously, the sustain is kind of like where I would say the finesse of the class kind of like comes, because you do have the kit of a PowerTech, which is crazy. You have 15 meter range, and then Rail Shot has armor penetration already tied to it, so you're able to just constantly proc your PAA, and that's pretty much all there is. The spec is pretty straightforward. Making a tactical for that, this is why I say that we got things like Arsenal, we got, what's that? Primed Ignition, I think that's what it's called. Then we've got Agitating Energies for Marksman. So pretty much any of the sustained tacticals, they just don't perform that well. I was playing actually Annihilation earlier today, and over 70%, I think, of my damage was like all just Rupture, which was from Spiteful Saber, and Slash. Like, how is that fun? If you play Primed Ignition, most of your damage is going to be reliant on the dot and using Blazing Bolts. You've got too much damage relying on uptime, which therefore hurts the class. And then if you nerf it in PvE, or buff it in PvE, like it's never really going to shine in PvP. The damage profile for every class needs to be more spread out. AP is as good as it is because its damage is well spread out. Other classes also need that. So, for example, Arsenal should get auto crit on Heat Seekers back, because it does have AoE Heat Seekers, by the way.
Yeah.
And if that auto crits, hey,
that's good.
Arsenal's actually a menace. You could probably do some cool things on it, and I would probably enjoy it, and it would be worth playing finally.
Yeah.
Like there's a lot of things they could easily do that would change it, and it's really just about the damage profile. When you look at classes that are not doing well, it's because individually their damage is all reliant on one or two abilities instead of it being mixed out between their like 10 different abilities.
I think the funniest example for me is like if you look at snipers, because you have, and I always make this joke because Marksman used to be the burst spec, right? Like the single target, like I was saying earlier, if you see that ambush casting on you, you know that you had to do something, otherwise your HP would just be gone. And nowadays, Marksman probably has the worst single target out of all of the 3 sniper specs, but it actually has some of the best AoE just by spamming suppressive fire, with the level 64 ruthless efficiency, extra damage. And then you have the tactical for 10% more damage, and suppressive fire hits for like 20k in a huge radius and on 8 people, right? So that's the funny thing, because Marksman, supposed to be the single target burst spec, has the best AoE. Virulence, which is supposed to be, like the dot spec, is I guess somewhere in the middle, and Engineering, which is supposed to be like the AoE zone control spec of the snipers, actually has the best burst. So it's kind of the opposite what they did.
NG for burst, Virulence kind of just for like single target, and then Marksman's like, what are you doing?
It's very strange.
What is wrong with that class?
Yeah, everything is wrong.
Every time I've played Marksman, like lately, it feels not great. Obviously, penetrating rounds still has good damage, especially if you're running Agitating Energies, because it reticks your dot tick over and over and over.
Yeah,
that feels really good. That damage feels really good. Everything else feels bad. Quick draw sucks. Follow through sucks. Snipe sucks. Ambush misses half the time. I believe I even have a clip on my freaking Twitch where I hit a 2k offhand ambush because my main hand ambush missed. And I used my auto crit, and I'm like,
nice. Well, that serves you right for playing Gunslinger. You have to play Sniper, come on. But Gunslinger does more damage. Many people don't know.
There's also some like interactions with the auto crit too. Like you can activate it afterwards. On Gunslinger you can't really do that, but Sniper you can, which is pretty interesting. There's definitely advantages for both.
Okay, I didn't know that. How does it work? So after ambush, you mean?
Yeah, you still have time while ambush is in travel time, or let's say whatever other ability you're using. While it's still in travel time, you have like a split second that you can still pop your your latest target retroactively, and then vice versa for Gunslinger. Since you have an offhand, you're not actually able to do that because it's already gone off. It's more like instant.
Is it one of those things which is like range sensitive? Because I know there's like a thing where on NG Sniper, if you're casting, explosive probe from max range, let's say like something like 30, 35 or 40 meters.
Yeah.
The travel time is so long that you can actually not detonate with EMP discharge in the next global cooldown because, the explosive probe hasn't traveled yet.
Yeah.
If you do it at max range.
Faster on Gunslinger, yeah. That's quite literally the interaction that happens there.
Mm-hmm. And is it similar on Marksman or?
Yeah, I'm pretty sure Marksman is pretty fast, but I'm pretty sure you're still able to there's still like a half second that you can probably do that.
Yeah, I was wondering if you're maybe in like 10 meter range or something, which I guess you shouldn't be too often on Marksman, but
right.
but if that happens, if you still have time to do it afterwards, the
that
lace
one
target.
I'm not certain about. I know that over the years they've tried to fix that, but as far as I know, it's still a thing.
Huh. I think that
because you still have things like low slash, how it's got travel time. Concussion missile is one good example. I actually do have a clip of this. But basically, concussion missile, since it has travel time, people can hit you 1 to 2 times before concussion missile goes into effect. And if they're hitting you as concussion missile is going into effect, they can actually get a free ability on you, just like low slash. So if low slash is in travel time, you can get the one ability, right? And then low slash goes into effect, and then they get the other ability, and that would be the one that would break low slash. And concussion missile also.
Oh, okay.
So you can use the delayed CC to get a free GCD off, and everybody can get a free GCD. It's not just you. So if they time it right, you can absolutely annihilate, which I think one of my most popular videos playing solo ranked is that we had a triple Deception Assassin group in solo ranked. It's like Etudes, me, and somebody else, I can't remember. And we were going against some pretty good players. It was Canu and I can't remember the other person. And Grand not the best player, but they were playing Operative, okay? Operative was at its peak performance at that point. And just through being able to delay low slashes, we were able to global first Operative within 10 seconds. And then we immediately turned around and globaled the other Operative within 10 seconds of that. The match was just over immediately.
Yeah, sounds nice. I mean, nice to do it on Operative, right? They're the ones famous for doing the stun locking usually. I still remember the set bonus they removed recently. Debilitator, I think it was, right? Where you had the two stacks on your hard stun. And just a less than 30 seconds cooldown because of the alacrity. It was a bit silly. So
so the charged abilities, by the way, I don't know if do you know this, or I guess everybody can know this now. I don't really have any secrets. So for example, Broader has a charged ability on Force Leap. So if you actually take the Interloper talent, which gives you 2 charges of your leap, and then you decide to change your talent later, you still keep the 2 charges of leap. There was a point where you could run Debilitator. You could get 2 charges of Hard Stun.
Yeah.
And then you could swap to the damage set bonus. So you could have your maximum DPS opener of double Hard Stun. So you're getting the benefits of having the other set while using the DPS set. And if you ever caught somebody in a 1v1 with that set and 2 stacks of Hard Stun, you could 100% owe somebody. There was nothing they can do. There's no outplay for it. You had to escape. Basically, in that 1 second, you had to hope that you could break and escape immediately. And if you did not have an escape, you're just dead. If you're a Juggernaut, you're just dead.
Are you talking about duels, or are you talking about actual arena and war zones?
Actual arena. There was an issue where you could get the double stack, and then if you had that opener and nobody messed up and they didn't break and react immediately, you could 100% owe them.
Because normally when you load into arenas, they remove all sorts of external buffs you have and stuff like that, right? At least nowadays, most of them.
For the most part, they do. You're not able to do this with most abilities anymore, but you can still do this with double leap. You can still get double leap and not take it. So you just have to wait until you actually get the ability. So let's say you go into arena right now, which if you have the double leap spec'd into, once the timer starts and you've got your double leap, just swap off of it and you'll still have it.
I mean, double
So a
leap
lot of this stuff.
double leap is one thing. I mean, it gives you basically one extra leap, but I'm thinking like if that shit works with 2 cloaks, you're gonna need to edit this out because I don't want to.
It doesn't.
I don't
doesn't
want
work
to
with
have
2 cloaks.
any more 2 cloaks assassins in my game, please.
If it's a tactical, it does not work. So you've got that. And if it's gear, it does not work.
Oh, okay.
So
Okay.
it's only talents now, but it used to be gear, it used to be tactical, it used to be everything.
Yeah.
Now it's just talents.
I mean,
and they fixed the Marauder one. I don't really care. You know, it doesn't really give them much of advantage. It's nice to have for 1 round.
yeah. Yeah, sure. I mean, 1 extra leap can make the difference, right? Between getting a kill or not getting the kill. And in Arena, that's maybe all you need. But I guess it's not intended gameplay.
Yeah, that's definitely something that could have been fixed a long time ago, but you never know. Like, you know how Mercenaries had Reflect and they weren't taking it. There's
yeah.
There's another instance where you could have Leap without taking it on PT because they changed the talent loadouts.
Uh-huh.
So whenever they do a talent rearrange, when they first initially did that, they didn't actually reset people's points, right? So they kept the abilities that they previously had.
Mm-hmm.
I can't remember his name. I think his name was like Bajorn or something. But he played PT, and he had Leap without having to take Leap. And then like Smokey was streaming with Reflect and not taking Reflect all the time.
Yeah.
So like there were some situations where people were having things that they shouldn't have. So the list of bugs is pretty big, and they've actually gone through. So when they do a talent reorder, by the way, they actually do reset points now. Took them twice to realize that they should probably do that, but hey, you know, they're slowly getting it.
Yeah. Yeah, it's another 10 years, and then they're gonna have it down, I think. I mean, there's a couple of bugs which they said they fixed, but then they didn't fix. Like, there's a lot of the level 23 talents, I think, for example. You remember there was this thing with Pyro, where you have the Flaming Fist dealing double damage, basically.
Oh, yeah, yeah.
And I think they fixed that, but they really didn't fix it, like the level 23 middle option. And there was also the similar thing with lethality, I think, right? Where you had, how's it called? Lethal Strike doing
that was
double single target
issue. Yeah, that was a tactical issue from 6.0. Like, yeah. I tried to get it fixed back then. Wasn't until I guess I fully explained it in this expansion that they finally did that, which was cool.
It's also confusing because Lethal Strike already hits twice, right? So when you're saying, hey, this ability hits twice, they're saying, well, of course, it's intended like that. Just read the tooltip.
Then I broke it down and showed how it actually worked, and then they're like, oh, so you're actually hitting 8 times. Yep. That's not good. That's why your tank immediately disappeared. Makes sense.
Yeah.
But I sent you the video. Obviously, you don't have to watch it, but it is just absolutely hilarious. First 40 seconds, just immediately deleted. Delayed CC is between concealment and deception. I would say deception had the upper hand because it was able to guard still at that point, which was absolutely nasty. Deception was the universal everything in one kit at that point. If you played deception, honestly, I don't think you could pick an easier class. So remember when concealment was considered it's the easy, beats everything class.
Sure.
Deception was quite literally that at that point, where you could just maul.
Yep.
It was so silly. It was a lot of fun. Don't get me wrong, it was a lot of fun.
Yeah, I'm just looking at the arena. Ooh, knockback. Yeah, Assassin still had knockback back then and spike. Oof. The first one gets global, and then the second one. What did he do? Did he just stuck? I have to rewind that. So this guy gets knocked back. Two guys get knocked back. Well, that's just bad positioning. Low slash. 30k, and the guy has 280k HP. It's not that much burst, but okay, and a 60k crit. Yeah, it's a pretty good one. By
3. Yeah, it's times it by 3, and their health's gone.
Crazy. But that's just two non-stealthers in the arena. That reminds me a lot of the arena meta right now. Like, I don't really play it because PowerTech kind of sucks when you don't have guard in the arena, but
your job is global somebody and hope.
And then you die, exactly. Global someone, do your 600k damage, and then you die, and then hope that your team finishes. It's just the most boring thing to do. Lie on the arena floor. But the few times I play arena, it's always full of stealthers. It's either like deception assassins, usually like at least 3 per arena, and then a bunch of operatives. What do you think about operative? Like lethality, for me it's a bit weird because I feel like lethality is really strong, but I don't see anyone playing it anymore, which is probably because of the ranged meta, at least on Darth Malgus.
Yeah. So the meta shift that was like kind of forced to happen was when Stealth Scan came into the game, and when like Lethal Haze got nerfed. There was like a trickle like effect. Obviously, this made people do less on lethality, so they kind of like stopped playing lethality. They're like, okay, I can't do any damage anymore, and it's a mixture of Stealth Scan being in the game, but it's also a mixture of the fact that a lot of people that were playing lethality were getting fluff damage by something that wasn't intended in the first place. So you actually do have to tab dot. You have to pay attention to getting your Toxic Blast off and actually getting that spread. There's a lot of damage available on lethality. It's just most of the people that actually play lethality were not taking advantage of it, if that makes sense. So while it is still strong, and when there's a good player playing it, you feel how strong it is. But the moment somebody that's not very good on it, you can tell. It's like a good PT versus a not good PT.
Yeah.
You can tell the difference pretty fast.
Yeah. So I mean, I never could play lethality for more than 2 or 3 games, to be honest. So I'm definitely not a good lethality. But I feel always when I play against one, they're just impossible to kill. I mean, it's probably also because
it's the whole point.
they're extremely hard to kill with the damage reduction they get from the heal from the revitalizers, right? And they can still vanish out. They get the extra duration on evasion. And of course, if you're playing PowerTech, forget about ever going on them because they have, what feels like 1 minute cooldown on evasion, which also comes with the reflect. So if you ever try to burst them, I know they still take the damage, but you're also going to kill yourself. So not a very fun class to play against as PT main, I guess. But then all the time I play it, it feels so bad because ever since they nerfed the single target with the lethal strike nerf thing, it feels like you cannot really kill people 1v1 that easily anymore. Like especially if you're playing against Madness and they're just kind of off-healing what you're doing on a single target. And if you ever get too close, you're going to eat a knockback route and then you're at range again. Or similar thing against snipers, right? Snipers now basically get 5k HPS for free just being in cover if they choose that talent. So it just kind of feels like lethality kind of gets neutralized in a way,
Yeah, the range meta, in theory, lethality shouldn't be good against range in the first place because its damage is all about uptime and cleave. Can't really get that on range classes. That's just the way they're intended to be played. But when it comes to what I was talking about earlier about how the philosophy of how they design the game, where they've got tacticals that increase your damage. So for example, if you're playing lethality in PvE, you're not running lethal strike, you're running the other tactical, which amplifies your single target damage, which, by the way, if you actually do run it and you just completely single target the entire game, lethality still does a respectable amount of damage. And you can kill people pretty easily with the PvE tactical and the PvE setup. The only issue is that, uptime tacticals, not very good for PvP. And that's why I think, if they change the tacticals, they change, some of that stuff that's way too reliant on a tactical or set bonus or something like that, and make them more utility-based or defensive-based, it would just make every class perform better in PvP instead of just, only be good in PvE because it's an uptime class or uptime, spec, I guess you could say.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, it would also kind of make, in a way, maybe the balancing a bit easier for PvP versus PvE, right? Because, could maybe have something that you never really would use in PvE that much, which is tied to utility because, most of the bosses anyway are immune to debuff stuns or whatever other utility you would put on there. Yeah, so I like that idea.
Like Shadowcraft is a prime example, by the way.
Oh, Shadowcraft,
PvP, but does not work in PvE.
Yes. Yeah, so I guess they already have that. I'm a big Shadowcraft hater because I used to play a lot of Deception a long time ago in 2.0, 3.0, and so on. When I was talking about earlier, right? You could just maul people for 30% and then again.
I do think it should be changed, right? I feel like no class, like with the double cloak thing, like you can pretty much just send your entire defensive and offensive kit at one person. You're pretty much guaranteed to kill that person if you use both your stuff outs. Which, by the way, don't do that, please. Oh God. It's so annoying to deal with. Yeah. It's like, yeah, you're like a superhuman for a couple of minutes, or not a couple of minutes, but like 30 seconds, but still, it's so irritating to deal with.
Yeah, it's very annoying, especially if there's multiple deceptions.
Yeah. I feel under no circumstance should that class be played like that. I really do think like 2 cloaks has its place, but I don't think it, with Shadowcraft, I just don't think it should exist. I really do like Maykal's entry, especially recently, because it actually gives it some team fight presence, which is awesome. Yeah,
I was never a big fan of that one, but I watched your video recently, and this so changed my mind. Like, how big is the range on that thing? I mean, it does like 50k, but it hits
it's
like
massive.
It's huge.
Yeah, I don't know what they did to change it, but so originally it would only proc off of that one terrible ability that nobody would take, and then they were just like, okay, screw it, you're gonna have it all the time. So whenever you have discharge, you're just gonna make sure that you at least use lacerate or voltaic slash, and then you're just gonna get this massive AOE, and it arcs too, so it can go really far if there's multiple people like in a row.
Okay, so it's like some lightning jumping from target to target. It's not like some
chain lightning. Yeah, kind of like that.
Yeah, okay. Yeah, it's pretty cool. I mean, if it hits for... How many people does it hit? Is it like 4?
It can actually hit all 8.
All 8?
Yeah.
And it's like internal damage and hits for, 40, 50k sometimes.
It's a lot more than that. And
I mean, you have to think about that people have defensives and taunts, right? But but still.
Let's say you get into a cleave game and you're hitting like 8 players with your discharge combo, so you're doing like 3 discharges.
Yeah.
Times that by 1 more, you're most likely able to probably wipe the entire team just with that alone. It is incredibly strong.
That would be funny.
There's been clips where I've actually done it solo. I don't know which video it was here, but it was absolutely hilarious. You'll hit like a 70k AoE discharge, and you see all of a sudden everybody's 20%. Oh, they're dead.
Yeah, that's crazy. I mean, maybe I definitely need to give that one a try then. Yeah, that's pretty crazy. I mean, the
only downside is definitely the durability for sure. Like if you're not taking the damage reduction on it, you feel very squishy. But if you want to do like really good damage with the AoE discharge, you're gonna want to take the crit passive instead. So it's kind of like so kind of thing. Yeah. But if you ever like want to kill sorcerers, like specifically, or like elemental or internal damage like classes, especially Sorks, Deception with the DR talent, like Sorks cannot do anything to you at all. You have so much elemental and internal damage reduction, like they don't even hurt you anymore.
Wait, on Deception?
It's hilarious. Yeah. You don't really need much more. I would say, like, if you put like a lethality operative, like put probes on the assassin, chances are, if they run a Second Wind and Shadowcraft, you pretty much will permanent kill Sorks over and over and over because you have so much damage reduction towards yellow.
Where do you get that from? I mean, you get the 5% from Voltaic Slash if you spec into it, right? The level 39.
Yep, you'll have about 34% permanent damage reduction to yellow damage.
So you get 15% from Dark Embrace passive. So you can basically always have that up, right? Because it comes from Maul, basically. Or after leading stealth.
It is pretty nasty, I would say, overall. Obviously, they can still kill you, clearly. But it feels very good into Sorks.
Yeah, because I mean, Deception for sure, I think is one of the squishier melees. I think it's also supposed to be, right?
Yeah.
It's supposed to be an assassin. But the thing that I really hate about playing Deception nowadays is that, you're using one of your 2 gap closers for the opener, which I think is just really poor design. Like if you,
I hate that you use your escape for damage.
Yeah, exactly. This I don't like. So
it should just be Phantom Stride.
Yeah, I mean, make Shadowcraft work somehow differently, right? But I really hate also Phantom Stride. That's such a long cooldown, and
Phantom Stride being on the global cooldown too. That's another one.
Yeah, it's very annoying.
Back in the day, you would do like triple discharge. That would be like your combo. I think I recently talked about that. It's like I miss having that just instant satisfaction, I guess you could say. With Follow Traverse too, but for Deception, it was like a direct nerf to their damage back then.
Yeah, I think I never played when that was a thing. But how would that work? You would basically discharge, recklessness, discharge, and then Phantom Stride and discharge again, or was that combo?
Yeah, pretty much like that. And then obviously you could stealth out and get recklessness reset. So you could technically get up to like almost 4. It wouldn't be quite 4, so it would take some really good timing.
Yeah,
but it was usually 3. 3 was the easiest to do.
Because recklessness resets cooldown like, when you exit combat, right? Like 60 seconds.
Yeah. And that's assuming that you still had the set bonus, which that set bonus doesn't exist anymore. I think there's a set bonus that reduces the cooldown by 15 seconds, which is the equivalent to the old set bonus. So I guess you could run that. But I honestly think Second Wind is just better.
Yeah, Second Wind is pretty nice for sure. The other thing I don't
Especially
like
with healers being the way they are.
Yeah. I mean, Second Wind is crazy. It's if I ever play without a healer, for sure I will take Second Wind, because I mean, just that one thing can, basically give you millions of HP. If you do get some kills, if you have like a kind of deathmatchy war zone where maybe you don't have a healer, but the enemy team maybe has already won, you can for sure, like especially on like the single target classes, if you're playing PT or something, right? And you have a class where it's very easy to get kills, Second Wind is so good. And I think Deception is the same way. You get so much value out of that, and don't forget you get the movement speed as well, right?
Yeah.
I actually also really like it on Rage, even though maybe you don't need it so much, because if you kill someone, you get a reset anyway on if you get out of combat, right? You get your leap back and so on. But on Rage, I think it's also really good.
Rage alone is like the king of resets. Like if you're ever against a whole bunch of noobs and there's just no healers, oh my god.
Yeah, you jump to
you're
1.
Constantly getting resets. It just doesn't stop.
Yeah, Rage is really nice. I feel like if Rage had a bit shorter cooldowns, like a bit better cooldowns, and wasn't so susceptible to like being just tunneled, and then you can take a lot of damage the first time. Yeah, something, right? Or for me, it's like the fact that Saberwort has 3 minutes cooldown, and you cannot really take Reflect, because then you don't have Mad Dash. 1 less Root Break. I mean, you can take Reflect, but I personally think you need the gap close. I like Mad Dash. I don't know. I think it's really strong. Really the damage is probably like on par with Carnage or even higher, because if you can get it off, right? I think like Rage is really really strong. Also has a bit better AO. Yeah, it's super easy to play. You just jump there, press 2 buttons, and it's bam bam 90k, 60k, and then your wishes throw. And if you have 2 of them, you get a reset, right? If you have 2 Rage Juggernauts, get an easy reset, jump to the next guy. So it's one of the best specs for stomping, I think.
Yeah, one of the games that I played right before I took a little break to play WoW, I was taking like 18,000 damage per second. Like I was the only front line in my entire team, just getting annihilated the entire time.
Yeah,
but I still, like destroyed the damage charts, obviously, because Rage is just it's obnoxious, right? There's no other way to really describe it. When Fury came out with its 100% crit or auto crit, I guess you could say, Rage always had its 200%. So that's basically what's happening with Rage. It's got 200 instead of 100, and that's why like Rage was always just better even back then. But Marauder had the Fel Splash Gene, so they could double cleanse itself and pretty much sit in stealth all the time, making it really hard to focus down. Well, Rage was just like a sore thumb. Like once you jump, you're in there. Good luck. And maybe you might get a pull or you intercede out, but that's all she wrote. You're in there. You're going to stay in there and enjoy.
Yep. Yeah. I don't know. So I guess rage is actually balanced then, right? Because there's things that counter it. There's a clear weakness, clear strength.
Yeah. I think like the only thing, if they were going to do anything with it, is assuming that they also bring up other classes to be on par, would maybe be lowering the damage a little bit on the 200%. If not, just give it like 5% more damage reduction after using Rage and Burst or Smash. So you already get 10%. If it had 5% more, I think it would be really good. And on top of that, it would still leave it really vulnerable to CC, because you have to constantly be doing your rotation to actually get the damage reduction. And if you're not able to, you're still vulnerable. So it'd still have a clear weakness, but it would make it a little bit easier for just like random tunneling to not be as effective.
I mean, Rage is an interesting one because I think it has probably the most amount of root breaks in the game, right? You have obviously Mad Dash, you have your fake health breaks, also roots. You have Intercede, and of course the Enrage one. Yeah, so you have at least 4 plus a CC breaker, I guess, theoretically. 5 ways to break roots, but I still feel I stand around a lot when I play Rage, because there's so many random slows or knockbacks flying around that you don't want to break all of them, right? You kind of don't want to waste your fake health just because you got rooted sometimes.
I've given up on my patience with that. I just send it on max HP. I just like, you know what?
Yeah,
I could probably kill you before it goes off.
Yeah, probably.
It'll be fine.
I mean, the big buff they got is they now have the CC immunity after leap, right? That used to be like vengeance only. Yeah. So that's actually that's huge, actually. So
Immortal has that. Like, what's up with that? Like, I hated that, and I still hate that. Like, what?
Yeah, I mean, like I said earlier, way back in the day, you could get that on all of them with the stance dancing thing, right? But there was a thing that maybe, I don't know, 2 or 3 players back then on the German server would even be doing, because you needed to learn. If you ever fucked it up, I think you couldn't guard back then or something in Xian form, or maybe it just was because I think you could guard in Xian form, but maybe you were like super squishy, so sometimes it happens that you jump to someone in Xian form and then you just ended up getting one shot because you are missing all of your tank stats or something like this. So it was a bit a risky move sometimes.
So your Surisu form would give you like armor, and it would also give you defense chance and like all this other stuff. So like part of your defensive kit on Juggernaut back then was literally to go Surisu form when you're being tunneled.
Yeah.
Don't really have that anymore. There was drawbacks of every single stance. Like there was a benefit and a drawback for each one, and it definitely hurt Assassin more because they would drain all of the resources that you had on Juggernaut. It didn't really matter. You could kind of dance a little bit more. Which kind of reminds me of like, back in 5.0 where the DPS could guard each other.
Yeah.
The stalling meta for Solar Ranks started popping up because they overbuffed mercenary defenses, and Lethality's always been really good at being durable, and they just said, screw it. Lethality was good in 5.0 too, but people didn't really play it because it didn't have the damage then, and when it got the damage in 6.0 and extra durability, it was just insane. But the stalling meta, like, first kind of came true in 5.0. A lot of players' skill levels definitely went down too. So burst DPS just wasn't like CC burst DPS wasn't really the meta. Sometimes you would see it, but most of the time it wasn't. So things like cross guarding, like if you had 2 Juggernauts in your team, you would cross guard between the enraged defense, and you would kind of win to kind of like balance out. Like, hey, you might be able to take up over 1 million damage. We might only be able to take 700, but if we cross guard each other, we can actually match the damage taken. Like silly stuff like that was like extra, I guess, RPG elements into the game to make it feel more of like a skill expression, or just like more depth into the game that we don't have anymore.
So that, like, DPS off guarding, you think they should bring that back, or are you happy they removed it? Like, which way are you leaning? Because it sounded like pros and cons somehow.
I think in terms of like competitive, like solo ranked, like if solo ranked was ever to be serious, I think at DPS off guarding there should be obviously negative effects, and I think probably maybe should exist, because I don't think they can balance the the range classes and all their self heals to classes that don't have them. But also at the same time, I do think solo ranked is an abomination. I think DPS games are terrible. I much prefer tank DPS, much prefer heal DPS, and much prefer tank and heal DPS games. Like, the whole DPS thing is just not very fun because it kind of goes back to WoW, except for this game's not WoW. A lot of the players in Star Wars compared to WoW, in my opinion, they're all, especially even like EU to NA, this is a difference. A lot of players in Star Wars will focus on damage more than anything else, and they won't CC. On EU, they focus on CC more than damage, and they'll get their coordination down a lot better than the Americans. And usually when we clash in like group ranked, you would see the damage difference, but you would also see that EU is way more coordinated, and depending on the meta, one would kind of like spearhead over the other, but it would still be pretty close.
Mm-hmm.
And the same thing goes for WoW. Like, their coordination is better, but their damage isn't, if that makes sense. So it really just depends on like what the meta is and what people end up focusing on. And I think when it comes to solo ranked for DPS, especially on NA, it's probably the worst freaking experience you could ever have. There was a lot more fun on EU. On NA, it's just turbo one guy the entire time. Oh, he bopped his defenses. We don't give a shit. We're still going through it. It's just not fun.
Yeah, I mean, I never seriously played WoW, but I played a little bit when Shadowlands came out, and played Subtlety Rogue. And so that was I mean, quite fun, very strong, of course, when that came out, but so different from Star Wars, right? Because I mean, first of all, you have like 2 very long hard stuns, very impactful cooldowns, crazy burst damage, like feels like way more powerful than this game. But at the same time, you can also easily get one shot. So you have way more playing around, coordinating the CC, trying to get the zap off on the one guy, and then chaining the hard stuns just perfectly so that you can one shot one guy before the other one can do anything, basically. And if the other guy does anything, breaks or uses some kind of escape, right? Basically, your go is over, and you need to try to re-stealth, run away until you have the next set of cooldowns ready or something like this, right? So feels like there was way more, and this is again my very limited experience with Arena for like a couple of weeks or months. But it felt like way more like tactical somehow gameplay rather than just, I mean, what we have now in Star Wars, which is mostly kind of banging your head against the wall, just mashing buttons, doing as much damage as you can, because anyway, there are not so many CC abilities in the game that you could even do that with anymore, which I think is kind of a shame.
I definitely prefer the coordination, but when it comes to like damage versus coordination and like the fine line between it, it almost never works correctly when it comes to just 4 DPS games. At least not in this game. Our CC system is not as advanced as WoW's, and our defensive system is not as advanced as WoW's either. So chances are you might get like 3 mercenaries versus 1 marauder, triple net that guy. He's probably going to die. He's probably not living that. You can throw down 3 stealth scans back in the day. Like, it wasn't a fun time. I'll say that. And WoW, it was a lot better. That's why I think heal and tank are like the unique things in this game. Obviously, there's healers in WoW, and they do change the dynamic a lot because their healing is actually good compared to Star Wars now. Without tank, you kind of just tunnel one target, and it's very one-dimensional. Not much thought is really put into it. It's kind of just like, oh, do a whole bunch of damage. You're playing like a DPS parse simulator, and that's it.
Yeah.
But when it comes to guard, like, you have this extra mechanic of like, hey, I can't just tunnel this person. I need to pressure this person. I need to pressure that person. I need to hit the DPS even though I don't want to, just so I can lower his damage. Because if I just let him do whatever he wants, he's going to kill us all, so on and so forth. There's a lot of complexities.
Yeah, there's 2 things, right? So one, of course, we only have the resolve system with the white bar. In WoW, you have the diminishing returns, right? And the different categories you have on the different CCs. Would be nice, I guess, if they at some point maybe would have introduced something like that in Star Wars as well, right? Because then you could have, maybe worked around some of the issues that we were talking about earlier with, force bound or the multiple carbonizers, or even the the barrier stunts of the sorcerers chaining together, right? So I guess if someone doesn't know how that works on WoW, but at least how I understand it is basically the first one. Say you get a hard stun will be full duration, right? And then the second one will be, I think, half duration, and then it keeps going until eventually you're immune for a while to that specific type of CC, right? Where obviously in Star Wars you just have one resolve bar, different abilities with different CC lengths, fill it up, and then afterwards you're immune for a while. But it's really quite simplistic system, I guess. That I think when it came out, at least there was something. So I never really thought about it because again, I didn't play WoW back then. I didn't really have any frame of reference, but for sure, I think the resolve system is something that they will probably never work on it at this point. It's I guess way too complex and only really matters in PvP as far as I know. So it's probably never getting changed, but for sure it's something it's a little bit better than in WoW, I think, as well.
Yeah, I kind of like the resolve system. I just do think there's obviously like Death Brand. I don't feel like Death Brand should slow. Death Brand was really good, but I don't think it should slow as much as it does. Initially, I feel like it's fine to slow, but when it re-triggers again, especially if you're a class that's not able to remove it, that slow is obnoxious. And then as soon as you start stacking that, then you stack it with like being channeled with Force Lightning, you're basically not moving your character and you're taking a crap ton of damage. It's not something that feels good. There's silly stuff like that just doesn't need to exist. It's like chain lighting too. Like, does it really need to root more than the initial target? I feel like it doesn't.
No,
it's really obnoxious.
It also
that it does that.
Causes so much desync, which is just really annoying. Yeah. Like if there's multiple lightning socks in the game, one of them has maybe, and you shouldn't be running this, but one of them has Stormwatch. Huge FPS drops, right? And always this noise from the lightning coming from above. And then with chain lightning, it's just everything is lagging. Performance is really bad. I know we talked about a while ago about the whole performance things.
Oh yeah.
I don't know. I tried so many things, but for me, my PC is pretty good. Not the best there is, but it's pretty good. And still I'm getting, 20 FPS regularly in like Crash Hardball or something like this. And everything I tried didn't really help, right? So it's like very limited to the CPU. Yeah, I tried your guide. I know you did a guide on performance improvements. I tried all these things. And
DirectX 9.
DirectX 9 I have exactly, and I tried everything I could find, but it didn't do much for me. Like I went from I guess the bad thing is on the low end, right? Because like on the fleet, I have 200 FPS if it's empty or on my stronghold, and that's all great. But when there's too many people, like 16 people casting abilities in a level 80 war zone, then performance just drops to, luckily in my case, not single digit FPS, but like 15, 20, which is like on the low end, every FPS matters, I guess. And that's quite frustrating, especially if you're at the same time recording or you're streaming or something, which eats more of your CPU.
Unplayable.
Yeah, it's quite annoying sometimes because obviously I want to record the gameplay so you can upload it, but makes it harder to actually do proper gameplay and makes the lags worse. So at this point, I don't think they will ever fix that, even though they have talked about some improvements. I guess something about DirectX 12.
And that's assuming that it actually helps. There's a chance that they may not.
For all I know, it might make it worse, right?
Yeah, they may not optimize it. So it's hard to say.
I'm very skeptical.
In voice, I'm able to explain things a little bit better. When it comes to performance, by the way, once you've done all those things, there is a section in the guide. Obviously, I do say take it with a grain of salt if you're not very tech savvy, overclocking and stuff like that. One thing that you could definitely do is monitor things like your CPU performance, like what's your frequency for most of the time. Is your CPU underclocking itself? Is your GPU underclocking yourself? There's a lot of low power options. There's a lot of like balanced plans and whatnot. I had one really big issue that was tanking my FPS for the longest time until I figured it out. There's there are some settings, but there's also a way to just boost lock. I wouldn't recommend it for your CPU. Your CPU is pretty smart at kind of like figuring out if you're playing a game that's demanding or not. But GPU is not so much, especially since Star Wars is like not very demanding on your GPU. My GPU would actually underclock itself, and that was awkward. My CPU would do it every now and then, but I pretty much fixed that. But if you could ever see that while you're playing the game and see if it's going down to like 2 gigahertz or your GPU is going like underclocking to save power. So that's the whole reason that it's doing that. If that happens while you're gaming, that'll cause severe hiccups with your FPS. It'll have your 1% low drop to like 1 to 5 FPS, and that's what makes the game jittery, stuttery, and just overall not very good to play. Like it'll look really bad. Like even if you can hit like 40, 50 FPS, when it's not doing that, it's never going to look good because you're still getting the super bad lows. So when it comes to performance optimization, you always want to clean out your lows. So like no matter what, if you can keep your lows pretty high, it doesn't matter how much total FPS you could get, having your lows always high will just be better performance, better viewing, better experience overall, and your latency, like your input latency to the game will be a lot better. That would be one thing I would recommend. And then also, if you don't have much RAM, let's say you have only 8 to 16 gigabytes of RAM, there is still memory leaks. As far as I know, still with previewing outfits, that still has a memory leak with it. So don't do too many outfits unless you want to crash your game. And one way to get around that is, I believe in the video I showed, what was it? Microsoft PC Manager. This is a Microsoft tool, but it will allow you to clean up your RAM. And basically what happens there is that it purges all the temporary cache. So it means that if you have a memory leak, it'll get cleared out. So having that, especially when you're playing Star Wars, especially if you have low amount of RAM or you're playing a game that has a memory leak, that will help you a tremendous amount. Not all the time that will be an issue. Most of the time, if you don't even interact with the preview menu, you won't even have the issue.
Okay, so that's like something for the outfit enjoyers. I think I only have some outfits on my PowerTech maybe, but not more than 10 or 20 or something like this. So I know you can go. I don't know, how high can you go now? Is there like a limit on outfits? Someone has probably tried it.
I don't know, but if you're ever going like on the GTN or you're at the cartel market and you're like previewing a lot of stuff, eventually it will rack up to be a decent size of like RAM just being wasted on those previews. They have fixed it. It used to be a lot worse, but just having a way to purge your RAM every now and then, or have it set to auto. ISC, or was it ISLC? I think is one program that will do it. And then the Microsoft PC Manager is the one that I recommended because it's branded by Microsoft, so people can trust it easier. That's one thing. But obviously, I think ultimately for performance, it's really just looking to see if your game is basically being recognized as a game, and is your PC underclocking itself to save power. So like when you're playing in performance mode, like your power option performance or balanced or whatever, to make sure it's not on low power, make sure your GPU is not on low power, just monitor it. And if it is happening, you at least know what's happening or why it's happening.
Yeah. I have a hardware monitor running, so I guess I could look at that, but I don't know. I mean, most of the games, to be honest, it's pretty fine. It seems to be an issue in certain games if there's, like a big fight somewhere happening on mid with certain classes, like I said, with, especially lightning sorcerers, causes a lot of performance issues.
100%.
And it's even worse if you're playing melee like me. I pretty much play only melee classes like 90% of the time, right? And because a lot of it is not lag, a lot of it is actually some kind of desync where you get rooted for 0.5 seconds by a chain lightning, and maybe we actually get rooted. It feels really weird. It feels like there's maybe some lag happening, but no, it's actually just a very short root or something, right?
You also have animation lag too. So like if you start getting like swamped with like frame drops and whatnot, you start getting animation lag. So your input latency starts going up. So your ability to react faster is basically going away because you have lag. The more animation lag that you get, the worse the gameplay is going to be.
Is that what causes like the ghost globals, or is that a different thing?
Yes, that is.
I hate that so much. That's so annoying.
It's almost inevitable.
Can you explain it for maybe for people that don't know what you're talking about? Like what's a ghost global?
I'll have to remember to link you. But one of the longest threads in the entirety of Star Wars. So when this game first came out, well, the WoW players came to the game, obviously. They were talking about, hey, we noticed that previous animation is not being canceled when you use a new ability. So you have a GCD system of 1.5. Anytime you use another ability, back then, still to this day, the previous animation, if it's not done, it does not get canceled. You have to wait until that finishes before the next one actually goes off. So things like kick. I have a clip where I use kick on Sentinel, and it takes up a global cooldown. I have another clip where I've used Fierce Power, and Fierce Power is off the global cooldown too, where it took up a whole GCD because it wanted to do the full animation. Sometimes when you have animation overlap, which you can see this on parsing, if you ever go parsing and you look at the parse log and you can see the separation between global cooldowns, you can see how one will be slightly past 1.5 or 1.4 and so on and so forth. You'll see them in red. They'll actually highlight them in red for you. That's when you have animation lag. That's basically what animation lag is. And because they don't cancel the previous animation, though there are some abilities that do, you run into that issue, and that happens a lot in PvP, and you'll get a ghost cooldown. And then also, you have a couple abilities that are actually animation cancelable. So with that knowledge, that means they can do it. They can fix it, but never bothered to. So things that you can actually animation cancel with is like Rocket Punch into Taunt. You can immediately taunt and hide your Rocket Punch. There's a lot of other abilities that you can do that with.
Yeah, Rail Shot as well, right?
Yeah, you used to be able to also do it with Phase Walk, and you could hide where your Phase Walk was if you used it with, what was it? Resurgence, even though they were both on the global cooldown.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, the animation canceling is like a nice niche thing I guess you can do, but the really annoying thing is when, you're basically the ghost globals, why it's called ghost globals, is you hit the button and the ability doesn't go off, right? Because the game basically thinks, I mean, I guess there can be different cases. Basically, the game is still waiting for like a previous animation to happen, or maybe, on your bar, the ability was ready to use, but actually the guy that you were maybe targeting has already moved on to another, like it's maybe out of range or something like that, right? So that's, I guess, not a ghost global. Maybe it's just like a different case.
That's like desync. There's a specific thing with desync too. So ever since the 64-bit, the game's been more demanding. So if somebody with a bad PC, this has always been the case, by the way, but if somebody with a bad PC, let's say they're lagging out, they have a lot of animation lag, or they're just lagging really bad. Let's say they're playing on a laptop and they got low power mode on, and it's trying to save power, so it underclocks to something that basically couldn't even run Star Wars in the first place. So they're lagging out. You can't hit them anymore. They can be standing perfectly still. You're unable to hit that person. Just because they're lagging on their screen, they cannot register what's happening to them, so it just doesn't happen. Like, I don't understand how that's possible, but you'll get like one ability every like 10 seconds. I had it happen on the PTS, and I had it happen in game. There's like certain people that like I know that are from like Spain or whatever. I sometimes don't even bother to kill them. Like normally I would want to kill them, but like it'll be every third to like fifth GCD that I try to use on them. It just won't go.
Yeah. But it seems to be worse like when you're playing melees, I think, for some reason. Like on a ranged class.
That's where you'll notice it most, because they have to go through the range check. Like if every class had like a range buff, it wouldn't be as noticeable. Yeah. So like Carnage and Concealment, they have 4 meter range. You'll notice it the most on them. But if they had less abilities that were only 4 meter range, let's say they bumped it up to 5 or 6, you would almost never notice this. Because you don't really notice it on range, because they don't have to go through that check. They only have to go through the check of, are they under this?
Sure.
It's easier to get out of range for like 4 to 5.
Yeah, that's the main thing I was really annoyed with when I did the concealment guide. Like almost everything you have is 4 meters. And if you ever try to hit the sorcerer, good luck, because they will obviously knock back you, stun you, run away, and you need to be in 4 meter range to do any meaningful damage. And Annihilation, I think, is the same. Sure, you have your 10 meter force rend, but exactly, they can click off the bubble, they can stun you. You can basically forget about killing them if they know what they're doing. Or at least it's going to take a very long time, and you need to be using your rolls properly, which I surely wasn't. So I think if they just like buffed, I don't know, 5-6 meters, like you said. I was saying like if concealment had 10-meter range, it would probably be a decent class because the damage is actually not bad.
Damage would actually be insane.
Is actually damage is actually quite nice on concealment. I think, if you don't know what you're doing with the rolls, it can be squishy because you don't have the revitalizers that lethality has, but the damage is actually really good. Like you can crit for 150k on concealment.
Yeah, 4 to 6 would be like a really good spot, but as soon as you make it like anything past that, like I think 6 to 8 would be like kind of crazy, but I think 6 is like pushing it. Once you go to like 10, you can start like pillar humping and kill people, and they basically can't even attack you back, which starts getting really toxic. AP can do that, and I don't know if you've like dealt with that, but that is probably the most annoying thing to ever deal with as a range player.
So what you're saying is basically you're just staying next to a pillar and then strafing out just to attack them, basically.
Yeah.
And the range player can't really do anything because they might need to cast or something. So if you basically dip behind the line of sight,
be that close.
Yeah, they need to get out into the open, and then you can either easily chase them or pull them back in.
Yeah, it's a weird situation, but most of those classes just need like the 4 meter just probably shouldn't exist anymore. It should just be like 5 baseline, and then maybe like if we were to have like new tacticals or new like utility or whatever, like giving the option, like the 10 meter punch is as troll as that tactical is. I do feel like that wouldn't be a bad ideal for like a talent or something. Like let's say we have a talent row that just isn't that great, but it could change the way we play. So we could play like a full on range build. Like that would be interesting.
Mm-hmm. I would like that, yeah.
Like can't afford it. Like there's a lot of stuff that they could do to actually add like diversity to how a lot of these classes, I guess, could play.
Yeah, I for sure would like to see them, because like if we're being realistic, they're not gonna do, or they're not gonna undo all of the pruning which they have done, right? They're not gonna, obviously in this situation where we're right now, invest like a crazy amount of resources into PvP, especially developing new skills maybe or something like that. Don't even want to talk about a new class at this point in the game's life cycle. But what they could do for sure, I guess, is bringing some abilities which are already in the code which they removed, bringing those back, or maybe some talent choices, right? I still have like the old skill tree open, but like if you could choose like a couple, what all talents would you bring back, like for, I don't know, for Marauder or in general?
Well, this is assuming that they don't add in the bolster for accuracy, if they don't give us 10% flat. I'd bring back the talent for Atari form, so that would not only give you alacrity, it would actually give you accuracy too. So I'd make sure that form actually got updated, and I would make sure it also gets updated for Arsenal. So both of those specs would get 3% accuracy for free. Mm-hmm. So that means they would be at 104 baseline. That would be like the number one thing that I would want to change. If I have other abilities, it's really just like you can't like do that without it being too biased to one class. I feel like you have to go individually between classes, but really it's just like talent reordering. As much as I would love to see predation back, I probably wouldn't want to see it be so focused on like Marauder, right? That makes sense, because there's like other things that are really good that are just gone forever now.
Like what, for example? Like the last one?
Well, personally, I always hated that retaliation was gone. I hated that unload is gone on PT. I don't like that Blazing Bolts basically does no damage. It has a slow. I would trade the slow for damage any day. That's another one. The fact that Ravage actually did damage on Vengeance doesn't happen anymore.
Oh, that's a big one, yeah. I don't know why they removed that one.
I hate the slam spam. Slam spam is just so dumb. I really wish that we could go back to Ravage actually being a powerhouse. Or at least Impel, because we used to have Impel autocrit and we don't have that anymore. So Vengeance kind of feels like a wet noodle. Yeah. So you AoE or you do nothing.
Vengeance single target used to be really good back in the day. Yeah, I don't know, many people probably don't remember that, but Vengeance single target used to be really good. You were like the only Juggernaut class that had the CC immunity after the leap. So it was like the Vengeance, forcing an immunity, and then, like you said, you had the Impale autocrit and Ravage hitting like a truck or Master Strike if you're a Guardian. That was fun to play with the sorry.
Hugh always
Yeah.
The dispatch or whatever.
Yeah, the vicious throw thing. Yeah. The execute. Yeah. That was super fun. Like you just jump around, hit people, but you still have some dots. It's kind of a cool spec actually. And now, I mean, I feel like Cut to Pieces Vengeance is somehow the ultimate culmination of the way that the development of the game has been going, right? Because that's, as you said, once you have the dots on enough people and the enemies are stacking up, you literally just spam one button and do 50k DPS, and that's there's absolutely no skill involved in that at all anymore. So it's something that you can play on a console, I feel like, right? And there's of course this meme of the Vanguard controller, which is like the PlayStation 1 controller, which has like 4 buttons, and you can play. I mean, of course, you can play Vanguard or PT like that with only 4 buttons. But as you said earlier, with you can do some things on PT because it has this kind of hybrid, this medium range, that you cannot really do on other classes. So I actually feel that actually APPT and Tactics is one of the classes that actually, if you want to master, it's harder than some other classes in the game. It's maybe like easy to learn, but there's a lot of things you can do that you cannot do in other classes, for example. Not sure what you
more so finesse. Like once you get that finesse, you have it on all classes too. So it's not just like you're mastering that class, you're mastering universally like kiting, movement, and like control. PT basically takes all the basics and fundamentals of the game and simplifies it into one kit where you can abuse them to basically an extreme. So once you've learned that on a PT, you can abuse that on like so many other classes. So it's extremely useful.
So basically what you're saying is like PT is a good class to learn because it's, I mean, first of all, I guess that the basic concept is pretty simple, right? You have your burst you set up, kind of your, 2 main abilities, and then the second thing you learn is your rail shot reset and so on. But it also transfers over to other classes in a way.
Yeah, so part of the reason, even back in the day, like most people gravitate or basically moved to PT was just the fact that its kit was 1, simple, 2, is good, 3, AoE CC is amazing, especially in group ranked, and 4, it's just straightforward. Your defensive is, shield. Shield gives you damage reduction. Not much more complicated than that. Like a lot of the other defenses in the game are not as straightforward. The most straightforward, most simple class in the game that can kind of like abuse everything that it has is PT. There's a lot of defensives that will actually go onto classes that just won't be useful against certain other classes. But for PT, that's not the case. Everything you have is useful.
But I mean, the same thing is true for Arsenal, except Arsenal really doesn't have, of course, the crazy damage that PT has.
Yeah.
And I don't know if there's so many things. I mean, Arsenal, I think is also one of those classes which is actually easy to learn, right? I mean, the rotation is actually quite simple to PT. You have some auto crit here, some hard hitters there, and then you have your reset mechanic, which, instead of resetting rail shot, you reset your blazing bolts. Except that, of course, you have, more range than the PT and way less burst. But I think actually Arsenal is also probably has a quite high skill cap in a way because one of the few classes that still has the CC. So you can, do something like CC a healer or a range player, which, is standing somewhere outside of the Zerg, for example. Of course, you have a Dispel, which is, I mean, few players are probably using that, at least in the games that I'm in. I can count the times that I've been dispelled by like a random person, probably on one hand. But I think Arsenal is probably also like a low skill cap, but not that easy to master class.
You have Madness too. Madness is definitely a great example of it. But obviously as a range, like it's a completely different playstyle compared to PT. But lot of that will.
So what can you do on Madness? Like that maybe like a normal player doesn't necessarily get.
Instead of like how to put it, instead of like playing like how Arsenal is, where you always have to be channeling and doing damage. At least with Madness, you can dot people, you can kind of line of sight. Positioning is like one of the most important things on Madness. A lot of players, especially new players, they're not going to understand positioning and how important it is. They're going to be able to face tank, right? But the face tanking is not what you want to be doing. Even though it can do that, it's not what you should be doing. If you're actually playing right and you're positioning well, if you ever get into a dueling situation, your chances are you're going to have everything and you're probably going to win that duel easily. So most of the time, people won't even bother to go into that situation with you, especially if you play it well. And in general, it's got all the tools I would say that you would need, but also being incredibly simple. One of the biggest fuck ups for every Madness Sorc, even like some good Madness Sorcs, is the fine balance between overkiting and doing damage. So when you're doing damage, you basically need to always be channeling Force Lightning. Force Lightning is where 90% of your damage comes from. You need to just constantly be casting that. And on top of that, if you're taking a different tactical, it's not the sustain one, which is Tempest of Row. You've got some other combos that you want to kind of learn how to use. But for the most part, if you're just running Tempest of Row, it's using your Force Lightning. Especially you get a buff for, I think it's like Lifesteal buff, I think it is, after you use your, Death Field? So you really want to be using your Force Lightning after that. But when it comes to, like, in comparison to Arsenal, it's just like really kiting, like teach you the kiting fundamentals and positioning fundamentals a lot more than what Mercenary will, because Mercenary is not the most mobile. Kind of a punching bag.
That's true. Yeah, I can take damage very well, but mobility is not the strength of Arsenal, especially now since you have to choose between the reflect and rocket out, right? Unless you're smoky and you still have it on your bar from when they forgot to reset it.
Yeah, which should be fixed by now.
Hopefully. Some players probably still have all tactical somewhere in their mailbox, huh?
Yeah.
Not me, unfortunately. Yeah. So that's I missed that one.
When I saw that there was a power load tactical still in the game, I was just, I can't believe that actually happened.
Yeah, that would be fun. That would give you some pretty fun super crits. But maybe
so in theory, that would give you 200% auto crit, and then it would give you double proc rate for your power yield.
Yeah, that'd be fun. That'd be fun. Well, where do we go from here then? I mean, I watched, I think, pretty much all your videos on the topic, but like talking about maybe the whole matchmaking, 8 people ranked, 8 people pre-made thing that no one asked for and they introduced anyway with the PvP revamp, at the same time removing ranked. Do you have any ideas like what's realistic at this point? Because I feel like where the game is right now, we're in a place where it's when it comes to PvP, more or less the maintenance mode is what we have, right? It's like the seasons. They're gonna keep doing the seasons. They're gonna be new reskinned pirate themed rewards for the seasons, and they're gonna run them every whatever it is. I don't know, couple of weeks. But there's not much in terms of competitive gameplay in there, unfortunately, which I think is like for all the issues that there were with ranked, right? I mean, you said you played it until pretty recently. The last time I played ranked was at some point in, I don't know, season 6 or something like that. But nevertheless, I think removing it was a big mistake. I think they're not going to bring it back, right? I think even maybe just mentioning it might get you banned in the developer live stream. So hopefully they don't ban me after mentioning it now. But I mean, I personally would like to see ranked back. I think it's 4, even though it's maybe the same 30, 50 something people that play it, would still be something that you could probably do, even in a system where you do have combat styles, right? So that was, I think, one of the arguments they made when they removed it, where they said, it's difficult to maintain because with 7.0 we now have combat styles, which is essentially dual specs. So we cannot give out, for example, top 3 rewards for PowerTech if you got your rating with, let's say, I don't know, a sniper combat style or something, right? So, but I don't know. I always felt that was kind of a lazy excuse. Because of course, you could do a system where you have the rating in the same way they have the battle stats, for example, right? Based on what discipline, what combat style you're currently in. and they can even differentiate by Warzone or by Arena. And I think at some point they even said that even in regular Warzones now you do have a kind of hidden matchmaking rating. So I think there's a lot of things they could do. I don't think there's a lot of things they want to do with PvP. But what would be, I don't know, some maybe things they could realistically do with a minimum of, obviously resources that they want to invest in PvP.
Well, in the thread that I sent you, I think if they want to heal PvP, which I think would be the main objective, the first thing they should ever possibly do, is fix the augment issue. Missing 5,500 to 6,000 stats. It's not good. That shouldn't be a thing anymore. They fix that. That'll make the new player experience a lot better. And also people that don't have augments or can't afford them have an easier time to get into PvP. Make the gearing system less complicated. And instead, form boast, basically everything in that form boast, they should do that. Reorder the talent trees to be a little bit more logical rather than putting a offensive with a defensive that just shouldn't be a thing. You don't really have much of an option. There's a reason why pretty much every Marauder takes predation. It's not a crazy thing to explain there. And then when it came to ranked, the main reason people win traded was that they wanted the top 3. If you just remove top 3 as a whole, you could quite literally leave ranked in as it was. It would have been fine. People getting gold or win trading for gold, nobody cares. Gold doesn't mean anything, but it's something that you could work for, something that you could have on your character, something that you could quote unquote flex, even though really the only people that are going to care is you because it's something that you worked towards to and you achieved, And then they could just rehash all the old stuff that they used to have and make it unlockable and tie that in with seasons. So like the old Fear stuff, they basically rehashed a lot of that stuff. But I do feel like a lot of those old titles should just come back. A lot of the old top 3s are permanently gone. Like a lot of them got banned. A lot of them got just flat out removed. Like in season 12, there was actually like over 12 titles that got completely removed from the game. They didn't get backfilled to the proper people that were supposed to get them. Just like in general, they could just repurpose all that stuff, resend it out. Wouldn't have to do top 3s, just remove top 3s as a whole. And then have like a prestigious title, like say, when X amount of arenas passed certain ratings, let's say like how WoW has it set up. Like if you went X amount of games after your above Glad rating, which is 2,400, you'll get the mount, right?
Yeah.
Have like a legacy title or a character title or something. Give unlocks like that. That would be incredibly easy for them to do, and they could do that every season. And or just give like a Omega Ultimate one that would take a long time to get. Just something for people to grind towards and feel the reason to improve, to maintain their rating.
Yes,
that would be very helpful, or not helpful, but healthy for the game and the competitiveness of it. Because when you're just going for a reward, people are just going to cheat for it. But when you make it a consistency thing, it's going to breed competition, and that competition is just going to make more people want to play.
That's a tricky one. I always feel like playing for rewards versus just like playing for the fun of it. I know that most people are probably not gonna agree with that, but at least for me, like back in the day when I was playing group ranked and so on, I never really cared about any kind of rewards that were there. I don't even know what was there back in the day for group ranked. I mean, yes, you got some kind of titles, but back then there wasn't even flares or anything like that. So it was pretty much just playing for the leaderboard, right? So there was some leaderboard, which of course now they also removed, which I really don't understand because those are historical things that people have achieved, and I don't know really why would you delete those. I mean, they were saying that some people apparently were feeling bad because their rating was maybe 800 on there or something like that. But even then, I don't understand why you completely remove the leaderboards. I personally am more a fan of having something measurable that you can somehow track whether you're actually improving, getting better or getting worse at the game. Like I don't know if it has to be like a single number. Of course, you can tie rewards to that after a while, but for me, it was never like when people are saying, "Oh, let's play ranked because we can earn that flying something mount." never cared. I just want to play PvP, right? Because it's fun, I think, for the competitive aspect of it. And just because the game is fun, right? And it's more fun if you play, with players who know what they're doing against other players who know what they're doing. So just for the fun of it, right? If the game itself is fun, and you have some sort of measuring, like whether you're doing good or bad, then I don't even need any rewards, right? You don't need to give me credits or whatever, OEMs or something like that, Cardinal coins. I'm not really playing for that, right? I would play a system if it was, maybe a little bit better class balance than it is right now. And you would have, regular pops without needing to wait. I mean, how it's now, it's quite idiotic. If you even wanted to play Arena still, you can queue in a 4-man and you're going to run into, you're going to wait a long time and then you're going to run into maybe a 2-man pre-made and 2 solo players or something. So it's completely pointless to play group ranked outside of arranged matches, right? And for those, you can even just use the challenge system, which they have. But if there was some kind of, they have these combat stats, or how is it called, battle stats? I don't even know. It's this menu in the game that shows you, how much damage you're doing on average, for example, in a war zone. And it's like, and I feel like this way they had a good idea, but they somehow, again, didn't really fully think it through, right? Because, for example, it tracks your average damage over all war zones on one spec. But first of all, it doesn't reset after some time, right? So you cannot really track, like, am I doing better in, what are we now? Season 6, season 7? I don't know. Am I doing better this season than I did last season? I have no idea, right? Because I cannot really track it in there. There's no reset function or something, or filter by season. And then also, of course, damage is just a useless stat. Like, you would like to see DPS, right? Because, if you're all winning all your matches fast, you're going to have low damage. Or in Arena, even, if you get targeted first, then you would maybe need something like, DPS compared to DTPS. So how much damage you do per second compared to how much damage you're taking and mitigating, right? So basically not just having like one number like rating used to be that depends on just whether you win or lose a match, but how good you're performing, maybe even, right? Like that would be fun. And probably something they could pretty easily do, because they're already tracking the damage you're doing and in this whatever battle stats menu. But I have no idea whether it's going up or going down, but I'm actually getting better, right? So
yeah.
I think
the PvP as a whole, as a reward, is probably true for most people that are like diehard PvPers. But when it comes to like creating somebody like that, you're gonna have like some sort of reward to get them in. Like, they're not gonna become a diehard PvP player just out of the blue. That's not usually what somebody does. Usually they'll start out, want to get XYZ, and then they start getting better, and they're like, oh, this is actually really fun now that I don't suck, and then they progress, and eventually, that's just what they enjoy, and so they play it a lot. That's how it happened with me. I didn't initially start out PvPing, but there was something I wanted, and I just continued on afterwards. I think that's one of the big issues that we actually currently face for PvP. It's such a bad experience for these new players, and we can't make any more hardcore PvPers at all. Like, in the game, I feel like everybody that wants to be just immediately leaves because it's just not worth their time. And when it comes to the OEM RPM thing, so like when we had like map farmers and whatnot, group ranked was more alive than it was like ever. Even back in the initial release, it was probably just as active, and the main reason was, even though it wasn't like actual teams, it's people were just willing to play with whoever because they would get their daily and weekly done. So you would have these bottom tier teams that would queue up that normally would never be in the food chain at all, and then you would have the mid tier teams that would queue up to farm the bottom tier. And sometimes the mid tier wouldn't be as good as the bottom tier, so sometimes they could do like a little swap, they could get better, and bam, a new mid tier team is born. And then have the high tier teams, and then the high tier teams would feed off the mid tier, so on and so forth. It would be a food chain that would constantly loop, and eventually some of those players would move up in tiers, and then you would have like the best, and they would kind of like cannibalize most of it, which is currently, or at least near the end, it would be the highest tier teams, like the best ones, would just cannibalize the entire thing. That would be just how it would go. Nobody would want to queue because you would play against the best team and you would just lose. It just wasn't fun without having a team that you could actually beat. most people don't want to just sit there and spam loss.
Yeah, that happened all the time. I mean, I remember that happening in like even back when Arena first came out. It was still very active then, at some point in Rise of the Hard Cartel, but because there is no crossover or something like this, right? Exactly what you just said basically happens after a while when, you know, the team that's, you know, maybe has, you know, a bunch of new players. There's only so much or so many losses you can take before you're, you know, just going to be demoralized and give up if your win rate is something like, I don't know, 5% or something, right? You're not going to keep playing for 2 weeks. It's not happening, right? You got to start to blame your teammates and maybe, you know, want to kick someone who you think is doing the worst or make a new team or something like that, right? But the bottom team drops out, and now the mid team that maybe had a relatively balanced win rate before, because they were always winning against the bottom team and sometimes winning, you know, against a little bit better team. Now they're going to be the bottom team, right? And now their win rate is going to drop, and they're going to be like, oh shit, my rating is 800. And even though it doesn't mean anything, you know, for them it looks like, oh, I must be the worst player in the game. Even though they are probably still better than, you know, 80 or 90% of the players at the time who are not even queuing up for rated. You know, then they would drop out, and then you would only have maybe the top 2 teams playing, and that's already how it was back in, I don't know, season 3 or something of ranked. You would only have a couple of teams playing, and I guess it got better at some point during the expansions where I was not playing. But yeah, when I came back in 6.0, I saw something very similar, right? They were, at least in group ranked, maybe, I don't know, 3, 4, 5 teams queuing at best on Darth Malgus. And towards the end, it was less, right? It was only prime time. And I mean, it's tough for new players, especially at this point in the game, right? I always have like new players somehow that find the channel and they ask a couple of questions. Sometimes it's even experienced players, right? That they come in and they say, "Oh yeah, I'm Gladiator, I'm WoW, I'm like super good. Can we play some games together?" But even they of course have a learning curve, right? You can be super good in another game. We still need to learn like all the animations and all the classes in this game, and it will take a while until you can compete, right? And if there's nothing to really compete for, then why would you invest that time, right? Like, there's other games you can play which are also fun. Maybe have less issues with desync and so on, performance, and you can actually express more skill. So I think, yeah, I mean, if they put some more ways in the game where how you can express your skill, fix some of the like gearing issues, like the augments that you talked about, and then maybe give like PvPers something to grind to, that would be the way to go. And some way to like measure your progression, right? Whether it's like rating, which they apparently already have hidden somehow, that determines your matchmaking, but I don't actually know how good it's working, right? Just, at least it doesn't.
Horrible, if you ask me.
It works really bad, yeah, because I mean, obviously with 8-man premates are just kind of destroying the whole thing, because you're never going to find a match for an 8-man premate unless it's another 8-man premate. You cannot match them with a 7 and a 2-man. It doesn't really make sense. And how many 6-mans are there in queue then? I don't know. Sometimes on Darth Malgus you can find a match, but it's like, maybe on the weekend once, if you're lucky, you can get like 2 8-man premates playing against each other. But mostly it's only because people know each other and they're writing, "Hey, we have a premate. Do you want to play?" And then you play against the other 8-man. So that for sure needs to go. I don't know who thought it was a good idea.
It's a terrible idea. So there's like another layer to that too, with the larger group thing. Is that, like, let's say you're playing an arena and you're playing all DPS, chances are 9 times out of 10 you're actually not going to go against another premade that has a tank and heal. You're most likely not going to see that. You're probably going to go against pugs 9 times out of 10, just because you don't have a support role. The same factor goes into 8v8 too. So you can make like a 6-man stack of just pure DPS, and obviously if you have 6 DPS, that's more DPS than you would have in a proper ranked 8v8 game, and you're probably going to stomp the entire queue, and you're most likely going to go against new players. You're going to go against pugs, you're going to solo players. You might see the random small group of like 2 players at best, and it's just going to like cannibalize the new players, and on top of that, it's just going to make the game incredibly unfun for anybody that has to deal with that. And that's something that was happening for almost 2 years in a row. I want to say 7.2. Yeah, it's like a year and a half at least. Over here on Starforge, and is horrible. Like, playing the game solo, not only is the queue time extremely long for me, 9 times out of 10, I'm actually backfilling into matches because it takes so long for me to get in a match. The longer that you sit in queue, the bigger the bracket expands. And if there's ever somebody that rage quits in one of the matches, you're basically first in line to go into that game. So playing the game solo while I still do it sometimes is such an unbearable experience.
Yeah, that's another thing. I mean, the whole pre-made versus solo discussion. Contrary to popular belief, I actually play solo sometimes, because I do play during the day if I get the chance, and if no one is online. I do have some characters which are not in guilds, and I do play on them. But it's, yeah, I mean, there is still a lot of games, at least on I mostly play on the German or on the EU server, where it feels like as a solo player, you can somehow influence the outcome of the match. Like, especially if you're playing something like AP, I think it's probably one of the best carry classes, if you want to, say it in League of Legends terms, I guess. But for sure, simply because you can one-shot the healer, maybe if the pre-made isn't paying attention, right? You can for sure do that better on AP than on other classes. But there is very many games where, you're running into 4+ people and it's just nothing you can do, and you might as well leave, but you cannot leave because, you will get your leaver penalty. And then the second one is how long? 15, 20 minutes, something like that.
It's 15, and then it goes like directly to an hour to like 6 hours.
Yeah, it's quite ridiculous. I mean, I'm not for people leaving matches, but if there's a match where one team is, the game is already over, and the team is grieving because they're simply spawn camping the other team, and they just don't want even to do the objectives. There's probably a reason where it would be valid for the other team to leave and just say like, okay, I'm not playing this.
Forgiveness for at least like 2 to 3 games would probably be a good ideal. So like if you leave 2 games in an hour, like, you get forgiveness, but if you leave any more past that, I think the penalties should kick in. There's like 1 or 2 games, you might just disconnect 1 or 2 times. I don't feel like you should be punished for that. And then like if games are really bad, like 1 or 2 games, you're probably not going to have more than that, right? So I think that's a good fine line, but also at the same time, there's just not a mercy rule in the game. The only mercy rule that exists is if too many people are gone and there's no backfills. Which, by the way, I hate backfills. I really think that they should just remove that. Just schedule the game to be ended after somebody leaves. Just do that. It'd save everybody a headache.
Ooh, I don't think. Are you sure about that? I mean, if one player leaves, you would have so many trolls, right?
Yeah, I do realize that, but like.
No. On Darth Malgus, you can't do that, Nick. We have so many operative players.
That is true. That could be abused really bad, but I do feel like that we should have some sort of mercy rule. Like if you're like down like 3 players or whatever, I feel like you shouldn't force 3 players to backfill into that.
Yeah, I mean, backfilling is one thing. What I don't like is that if you get a disconnect and you still get the leaver penalty, I mean, I think that's kind of low.
It's definitely.
Other games have that you reconnect, right? And in this game, you get kicked from the war zone and you get a penalty, just because maybe you had 1 second of disconnect or something.
Yeah, at least 1 game forgiveness for like every hour would be more than enough.
Yeah, something like that.
Because like if you play, you disconnect and you don't know if your internet's fixed, you go back and play again, you get a 15-minute. And then let's say you wait all that time, your internet seems fine, you disconnect again, dude, like, you're probably not playing for the rest of the day.
Nope, no, definitely.
Honestly, after the second time, I've given up already.
Yeah, I mean, I'm not waiting an hour. There's no way. It's there's other games out there to play. So speaking about that, so what other games do you play? You still playing WoW, or you quit that?
I'm not currently playing WoW, mostly just because there's not much to do at the end of the expansion. Everything's kind of like pointless.
Yeah.
I wasn't doing like any last minute pushes or anything like that, so it's like all kind of irrelevant to me.
Yeah.
So no, I haven't really been playing WoW. I do plan on playing WoW as soon as the expansion comes, or the early release or whatever.
Mm-hmm.
Actually, working that day, so like whenever I get home, I guess. I play some old school RuneScape and sometimes like Overwatch, Minecraft, and Palworld. That's pretty much the only things I do nowadays. I've tried a lot of other MMOs, and New World was like the last one that I actually gave a solid chance to. Really enjoyed that game, but
how's the PvP?
Yeah, that game was not ready for release. The PvP in it was like pretty solid, but there was a lot of issues where it just kind of like caters to Zerg, and it took them like 2 years in a row to basically add a mini map so you could tell where your team is in the Zerg PvP mode. So once your team got wiped, unless your team was like doing call outs, you had a relatively hard time trying to find your team. And if you ever played a disadvantage in Star Wars, just imagine playing a disadvantage in New World, where it's action combat and range is kind of the meta. It's very unbearable. So Arena was fun, but yeah, they didn't have a ranked system. It seemed like they were going to make one, but they didn't. And then they never did anything about premium queuing, so you have somebody playing healer to DPS, and they wouldn't win every game, but they would win the majority.
Yeah, so same problem is here. Premeds ruining the queue. Yeah. I don't know. I'm thinking what else to play, if there's anything coming out this year, but I don't think there's too much like on the MMO horizon. It seems like all the good ideas are basically out there. And the likes of WoW seem to be doing more, they bring back the classic versions of it. So I'm thinking whether someone at EA is thinking about Star Wars The Old Republic Classic at this point. I don't know. I said earlier I would play it, but I'm not sure it's happening anytime soon.
Yeah. Let's just imagine if like Microsoft picked up Star Wars instead of Broadsword. I would have been excited for that for sure, because they could use Blizzard, like take some of Blizzard to work on Star Wars. That'd be awesome. Or even like just making like Disney decide, hey, well, you know what, Star Wars, the first one, Star Wars: Old Republic, was really good. Let's make a new one, but do it right.
With like a proper engine, yeah, with no no hero engine, strange fork that they never got under control. Like with proper performance, that would be, I think, the nicest thing one can dream.
They could just copy Star Wars as a whole, except for like don't go down the. Obviously, I think it's more so just inexperience. Like whoever's currently working on the game, I don't think they're experienced in most of the fields that they're working in. I think there's some amazing people that work on the game. They've done some amazing things, like the loadouts thing. Like that was amazing. They did an amazing job on that. But when it comes to like understanding the classes and PvP, I feel like whoever's in charge of that doesn't know what they're doing. And I feel like it's kind of hard. You would really just need somebody dedicated to it, and I don't think they have a dedicated person to it, so you can't really fault the person that's actually taking care of that.
I mean,
it's probably like the 6th thing they have to do on their job list.
They used to have this class representative program, right, where people could give like feedback, and you would have some representative for each of the classes. Were you on that, or have you ever like thought about doing that? No,
I applied to be a content creator ages ago. Back before Koyas even was a thing, I applied. Back when I streamed all the time and I made a lot of videos. Like I was ignored, and like Koyas came around, I promoted him. I had a decent amount of viewers. I streamed all the time. I promoted him, and he ended up like applying for it and like getting it right away. I don't know what was up with that, and I think I applied one more time afterwards and got ignored again, even after reaching out to Jackie. And I'm like, you guys are just irritating at this point. I don't really want to keep bothering with it. Obviously, I've not done anything bad like in game. I've never been banned. I've never had like any issues before, so I'm not really sure like what was up with that.
Yeah, sounds like you're on some blacklist.
Yeah, it might be just because I criticized the game, and it's not really short. It's not really like I hate the game. I just want to see the game do better. So
yeah, same here. I mean, maybe they can hire you. They need we're always joking like with one of the guys from our guild is is actually retraining now to become like a coder. So like a developer. We always say like, why don't you apply to BioWare and tell them to like fix their game? But yeah, he doesn't want to do it. He says like, no, I better I work on something else. It's like a waste of time trying to fix that game.
Yeah, I feel like even if you like knew how to and had the time, I feel like it just wouldn't. Not only would it not pay enough, you probably wouldn't get the creative. Like you wouldn't be like, okay, so like Keith is like, which is it, Keith or Eric? I don't know. I think it's Keith. Like where he's got creative control. So like everything has to go through him. Chances are you're probably not gonna get anything through him. So yeah, but even hypothetically, I feel like their hands are tied.
Yeah, but I mean, I don't think that he even plays PvP probably.
Last thing I know about him is he plays lethality.
He plays lethality. Well, that explains some things. I think one of the developers back in the day was like a PowerTech main, which is why they never got nerfed.
5.0, there was a comment developer that took PT, yeah.
Yeah. Dirty lethality mains, man. Yeah. Well, I guess then someone has to do the private server thing, right? And just take the code, spin up their own server, and once it eventually gets shut down, maybe we can play the game or rebuild it from scratch, right? I mean, just rename the classes instead of Juggernaut. You call it something like, I don't know, Force Warrior, Dark Lord, something. And it'll have like the same abilities with different names. You're kind of like a lot of like the Asian MMOs are doing it, all basically just copying WoW, but with like better performance. I think that'd be cool. Like better performance, actually working PvP, and they can leave out a lot of the stuff that I don't know. I'm not too big on the story quest that they released in the last years, at least.
So like a game like this, so it's basically like a complete copy from WoW, but it's like low everything, so it's like really optimized for performance. They just straight up copied everything from WoW and just made it arena only. So if you're really good at WoW, you could just go into this game and you could dominate. I feel like if they did that with Star Wars, like that would be awesome. Like anybody could just take the core fundamentals of Star Wars and make a game where it's just arena only or like Warzones only and stuff like that. I feel like it would probably do kind of well.
I would play that. I mean, I was already thinking about that. If there was a game like that, I mean, for sure, you have an MMO, right? You have all the things that come with it, the community, and I mean, I only got into PvP at the beginning because there was PvE, and that was the first thing that kind of the story was nice. I like playing the story, and then I got to PvP kind of via PvE, and then found a guild, and that whole kind of guild and community story thing kind of ties together. And I feel like maybe without it, PvP standalone wouldn't really work. But then, of course, you have games like League of Legends, where you only have PvP, and of course, it works great. So,
yeah, I love the RPG elements to Star Wars, but like that's just what got me into the PvP for the game. And if you actually look for PvP MMOs, pretty much Star Wars is actually recommended in like nearly all of them. And it's a shame because PvP now and the new player experience now is probably the worst it's ever been.
Yeah, I mean, I'm just looking at this game. I don't know. I mean, for me, what kind of turns me off about this game is the graphics. It looks like quite.
It's quite dumbed down,
quite low definition
graphically.
But then again,
the ideal is there.
Yeah, the idea is there. It really does look a lot like the arena frames and everything. Frostlands. Yeah, seems familiar.
Somebody could do this with Star Wars. I feel like it would be really good if you just copy like the core mechanics of Star Wars, like when the game initially came out and whatnot.
Yeah.
Whoever designed like the original maps, whoever designed the original arenas, whoever designed the original combat system, they were absolutely geniuses. They did an amazing job. Everything they did back then has carried the game for so long, and they canned those people like right away. It's crazy to think about. Like, if they had the creative direction now, like I can't imagine how good this game could have been.
Yeah, I mean, there's probably a reason why. I keep coming back to this game after the more than 10 years. It can either be, complete mental insanity, which is also not unlikely, or it can be that the core game is actually fun, right? And
Yeah.
I mean, of course, you also have some kind of connection to your character and so on after all these years, and for sure that's a thing as well. But yeah, like you said, I think the base game is actually really fun, especially with the guard mechanic, right? I mean, people have been talking about, oh, guard is too overpowered. They then removed it from the DPS, so now only the tanks can do it. But I actually think guard is super smart because it gives tanks something to do in PvP, right? Where in WoW they're basically just useless meat shields. You just kind of ignore them, and they're not really that useful altogether. So in 3v3, I think you don't even play with a tank ever in the arena.
Nope.
Except for maybe some strange patches where they were somehow overpowered. But in this game, you have kind of this trifecta working really well. So yeah, I mean, if someone would do something like this, maybe with a bit more polished graphics, proper performance for Star Wars, I would play it for sure. I mean, I would pay to play that for sure, even if it was like only PvP.
I think like one of the issues too, with not having tank in Star Wars, like the game is too simple, if that makes sense. Even with all of our complexities back, I still feel like without guard, some of the strategies that are going to happen as soon as you get into arenas, they'll be like, oh, it's this class playing this spec, or it's this person. Your strategy 9 times out of 10 is always going to be just tell that person. Not until they die. And that's going to be it. That's all she wrote. And there's not enough ways to prevent that without guard.
Well, but of course, even if you have a tank, then you have the issue of tank tunnel, right? And which was also really annoying. I mean, in a way, you could say it's also balanced because, I mean, way back in the day, people used to play like defensive tanks, right? So full mitigation setup, and then you would only, like, the tank wouldn't do any damage, like way back in the day. Would just sit there, wait for, like, save the global cooldown, wait for the guard swap at the right moment to kind of anticipate the hard swap of the other team. And then basically, in like the split second before the enemy team tries to CC him, swap the guard to the healer, for example, who they're likely going to kill, right? And then at some point, people figured out that, you can run like a skank tank setup, and you would usually play, maybe like a Vanguard tank with like DPS gear and 2 Smash Marauders or something. And you would just have so many damage that you could just overpower the other team. And that was a setup people were running. But then at some point, the counter to that was, because the tank didn't have any defensive stats, and didn't have much HP at all, you could simply just kill the tank as well. And of course, it would still be better usually to run skank because defensive stats don't do so much against, the classes you would use for tank tunnel with all the internal damage and so on. But I mean, in a way, I guess you could say that's somehow balanced. I was thinking,
I would say it's balanced, yeah.
I mean, yeah, maybe if the defensive stats would somehow work a little bit better against the tank tunnel classes, but then there wouldn't be a counter to that either, and it would just be too hard to kill them.
There's certain things that you can do to counter tank tunneling, but I'd say first things first would be really then play with a class that has taunt. If you've got a class with taunt, don't taunt yourself when you're being tank tunneled. Only let the person that actually has taunts taunt for you, because if you taunt over theirs, it overlaps their taunt and you're just taking full damage. So just let them taunt for you. And back when DPS still had guard, I remember in 4s that I used to guard Neff because the one SS team thought it was a good idea to tank tunnel PT. He was like, oh, tank tunnel because PT. Like, I don't know what kind of logic that was, but all I did was throw a guard on him and we win automatically because they don't have any other strategy other than tank tunnel. So it's really silly. But even without using guard, you can still like taunt and protect your tank. Tanks can play in certain ways. You can run away. There's counterplay to it. And then nowadays,
you can play assassin to stay in stealth.
Yeah, you can also play differently. There's actually build options. They changed some things going into 7.0. I don't know if people paid as much attention, but there's defense chance after you use Fury Strike on Fury. Part of the reason why Fury definitely felt as obnoxious as it used to. That 15% defense chance is also including free yellow damage. And this, I don't know why they changed this. This is random that they just changed it. They also changed the way some of the tank relics work. And one of those tank relics, I can't remember what it's called, but it'll absorb damage for you. Not only will it absorb damage, it'll absorb CC. Not only will it absorb CC, it'll absorb regardless of damage type. So when you have that, I think it procs every 40 seconds. Tank telling is near impossible. You pair that with something like a little bit of mitigation or like the PT super shield. You're basically never killing that person.
Yeah.
Especially if they're pretty competent.
Which relic is that? Oh, sorry, I wasn't.
I don't know the name of it, but it absorbs damage. It's a set amount of damage, and it procs every 40 seconds, I think.
Yeah. I just try to find that. Like
so
something.
If you ever, So if you ever hit like a PT tank that's mitigation, or just like a mitigation tank in general, you've noticed that your stuff like misses or that gets absorbed, and they're just standing still, but they got this animation around them.
Mm-hmm.
That's the proc that I'm talking about.
Yeah.
You can build that if you want actual tankiness. That's the relic to go.
Okay, I think I have to edit that part out. I don't want people to be even tankier, especially the PT tanks in my war zones. but it's good to know. It's good to know.
Yeah, it's super obnoxious, but yeah, that exists.
Yeah. Listen, man, we're in over 3 hours. I think I'm gonna call it a day here. Time flies when you're having fun. In case anyone doesn't know.
Talk.
Yeah, it is. I am a boomer. I'm closing in on 40 faster than I like to admit. So, yeah, let's see. Hopefully, I have enough years left to see the game sunset eventually, and SWTOR 2 being launched at some point. So, yeah, I'm looking forward to that. What are you looking forward to in terms of Star Wars?
It's hard to say, but
Come on.
know.
Okay, end on a positive note.
I would like to see Star Wars at least compete with WoW, like seriously, for one chance in their life outside of launch, because launch flopped, and if they relaunched like Star Wars 2, that'd be insane. But really, they need to be concerned with the health of PvP if they want anything to go well.
All right, and they should hire you for Star Wars 2 with a new team.
Yeah, I'll just balance the whole game.
You'll be the class designer. I'll vote for that.
No range classes.
No range classes, only melee. Everyone's gonna be a marauder or a PT. All right, sign me up. All right, man. Then thanks for doing this. Let's wrap it up. I'll put your YouTube on the screen in case anyone doesn't know that, but probably everyone who watches my channel already watches yours for a long time anyway. So yeah, thanks for doing it. And see you around.
All right.
Thanks.
Have a good one.
You too. Thanks, man. Bye-bye.